Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1549 of the War News stream. And tonight we have big news out of every single region of the world. We are seeing that Russia's major Black Sea port of Novorossiysk has been attacked this evening massively by Ukrainian missiles, and the damage is widespread to say the least. We've also seen that Iran has suddenly closed its airspace amid heavy GPS jamming across the Persian Gulf, and also Iran just declared its highest state of military alert amid fears that this weekend could be the moment that attacks restart, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news from around the world, as we have been able to hear of significant Ukrainian drone attacks that have been able to cause major damage to the Russian port of Novorossiysk. These attacks are as large as the record-breaking attacks that we saw several weeks ago that were able to render the port of Novorossiysk inoperable, and it appears that the second attack is now attempting to destroy and has successfully hit some of the critical infrastructure involved in supplying the port with its oil resources. We've also been able to see some additional secondary attacks within the port area as well, while major Ukrainian drone attacks have also led the Russian Federation to issue an unbelievable announcement. The Russian Federation has declared that the land bridge through the Zaporizhia Oblast is now closed for a limited period of time due to Ukrainian drone attacks conducting strikes on critical infrastructure and logistics within this area, making the region militarily impassable, meaning now that the Kerch Bridge will be the only artery for Russian forces in the Kherson Oblast and in Crimea to be able to receive their critical supplies. At the same time, fuel reserves are dwindling rapidly in the Crimean Oblast, as news has emerged today that most gas stations within Crimea physically do not have any gas or diesel to sell, and it is believed at the moment, with the Russian Federation using a significant amount of civilian contractors to supply the armed forces, that the Russian Federation's army within this area is most likely also deprived of most gas and diesel needed to be able to operate their armed forces, showing that at this moment right now, Russian forces in the Kherson and Crimean oblasts are most likely in a critical state and are not able to continue any advanced maneuvers or combat operations due to the physical lack of fuel. We've also been able to hear additionally outside of this news in the southern parts of the Russian Federation in occupied Ukraine that the Ukrainian armed forces have also been striking the Russians quite heavily throughout the rest of the country, and we've also seen some pretty shocking developments coming out of Moscow as a result of this today. Moving us on in the Middle East, we also were able to hear of significant developments over the course of this day as the Islamic Republic of Iran has raised the IRGC to the highest alert level possible under the IRGC's alert status register, and we've also seen that they have now issued a NOTAM shutting down the entirety of the western airspace of Iran on into Monday. This has also come at the same time as significant strikes by Israel are being conducted against Hezbollah forces throughout the entirety of Lebanon, and we've also been able to see additionally that within the area of the Strait of Hormuz, it does appear that the United States is still deliberating strikes at this moment, as it does appear that diplomatic talks have once again reached a dead end as usual and are not producing any sort of positive developments for the United States or the Islamic Republic of Iran. GPS spoofing is already being conducted by a myriad of Gulf states, particularly the United Arab Emirates, and we've also seen simultaneously that there is some very interesting developments coming out of Washington, D.C., such as the president's schedule being canceled entirely over the course of this weekend, including him attending one of his son's weddings to be able to stay at the White House, showing that there is a decent possibility that military action may resume possibly sometime over this weekend, although once again, it's never entirely a certainty. We have also been able to hear additionally that the Polish Republic has received its first batch of F-35 Lightning IIs, and we've also seen that the United Kingdom and other NATO forces are currently conducting military exercises using the London Underground as a makeshift shelter to be able to shelter command posts and critical operations of defense forces and air defense forces within NATO in the event of the outbreak of conventional war with the Russian Federation. We've also been able to see additionally that the Ukrainian armed forces and the president of Ukraine have further elaborated on the possible risk of a Russian invasion into the northern borders of Ukraine from the territory of Belarus, and they have stated that this attack will be happening at the most opportune time for a defense, the earliest being autumn, which will be the beginning of the second Rasputitsa of the year, meaning that there is incredibly good news coming out today, at least from Ukrainian intelligence, showing that if any possible offensive is conducted by the Russians, it is most likely going to be during the worst weather inclements of the year for offensive armored operations, which are the Russian strong suit, even at this point in the war. We have a humongous amount of news to cover over the course of this day, and we are going to be making sure to get through each and every single bit of it, starting with our largest stories first, and then moving our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night. And I do have to say, folks, that today we are not short whatsoever of any major breaking news, especially with the Ukrainian drone attacks and the damage that they have caused over the course of the day. And moving us on into that major breaking news, we will be going to the heart of Russia's naval operations and also maritime operations at large, the port of Novorossiysk. Many people on this channel have been greatly familiarized with the port of Novorossiysk over the past few years, but the port of Novorossiysk has never held a precedence or a relevance like it has over the past few years when the war started. During the beginning of the war, the Russian Federation based most, if not all, of its naval and maritime operations out of the port of Sevastopol, as it is the home of the Russian Black Sea Fleet and also has significant port facilities not only for the Russian Navy but for also civilian vessels as well. Over the course of 2022 and 2023, the Ukrainians were able to develop long-range strike drones that were able to eke out enough range back then, a whopping 120 miles, to be able to reach the port of Sevastopol and start causing irreparable damage to the Russian Navy. With the loss of about half of the surface combatants, or the surface combatant vessels of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, a large portion of the Russian Black Sea Fleet was then relocated out of Sevastopol and to the port of Novorossiysk, where they have remained at the Vostochny Rayon up until this day several years later. Not only that, the port of Novorossiysk is a very important one for the Russian economy, as the Russian economy is a monolithic economic structure, operating entirely off of the oil industry being their main source of revenue, and what props up the entire national economy at the end of every waking day. This means that facilities like those at the pumping station and also the oil storage facilities like we can see here at the town of Grushevaya Balka are incredibly important to the Russian Federation's economic abilities, as without these ports and these facilities, they are not able to load oil onto the waiting ships at port and are able to ship these out into the outside world to be able to continue to make money, to prop up the Russian economy, and to also produce tax revenue for the Russian government to continue to finance its war in Ukraine. This means that the port of Novorossiysk now has a double important purpose of being hit, or a doubly important strategic reason for being hit by the armed forces of Ukraine, as it now serves as a military hub for the Russian Navy and an economic hub for the Russian Federation to be able to ship out its oil. About a month and a half ago, this port was attacked by the armed forces of Ukraine, and significant damage was caused to a Russian Kilo-class submarine within the Vostochny Rayon during that period of the attacks, and also the pumping stations here at the actual port, which load the oil onto the ships. Without that pumping facility, nothing is entirely possible for the Russians at this port. However, there is another important target that we did not really cover the last time and didn't really seem to be incredibly important until today, and that is the town of Grushevaya Balka, which is directly across this mountain range that makes up the valley that the port of Novorossiysk is within. This is actually a critical oil storage facility, which is used for none other than the oil storage down here at the port of Novorossiysk and the oil pumping station. This facility is actually several hundred feet higher in standard elevation than the actual oil loading port below, and this allows for the oil to actually have some pressure due to it being forced down into the port by gravity instead of having to use nothing but artificial pumps to be able to store and transfer the oil. This means that Grushevaya Balka is an incredibly critical part strategically of the Russian Federation's oil loading capabilities at the port of Novorossiysk, and the Ukrainians have decided as of today that it will no longer be an operational oil storage facility for the port of Novorossiysk. Ukrainian attacks came in thick on Novorossiysk today. It is estimated that at this moment, around 50 to 70 Ukrainian attack drones were directed at the town of Novorossiysk at a singular instant during the course of this attack, and footage began to emerge once these drones made it to the air defense perimeter around Novorossiysk of the attacks and how they transpired for the Russians. And suffice to say, it didn't go that well. This is just a brief little glimpse of what we were about to be seeing, which is the fire at Grushevaya Balka. But more importantly, there's a lot more footage that came out showing us the disaster and the chaos that unfolded beforehand in the port as the Russians were trying to shoot down most of these attack drones that were coming in. And here is some of the footage, most likely from the east coast of the port, or more so east coast of this little gulf that the port of Novorossiysk is within, letting us see the air defense fire coming from the Vostochny Rayon into the bay, attempting to shoot down these incoming drones. And we hear the air defense fire, and we already see the smoke rising and the fires burning from several prior impacts which look to have hit the pumping station or the Vostochny Rayon, as the Russian air defenses, as usual, are firing across the bay and into the residential buildings across the other side.
Look at that, man. They are firing all over the place, like stuff firing across the whole coast. I mean, that's wild. Look at that.
It's
got the lasers out.
The famous star shells, which are basically a staple of Novorossiysk at this point. Oddly enough, folks, this one thing that's interesting that we can see or learn about these star shells is that apparently, even still, the port of Novorossiysk does not have night vision devices, or NVDs, or nods, another name for them, that are commonly issued amongst the Russian air defense groups, because star shells and nods can be used together, and in some cases the nods can increase your visibility with nods on when you're looking at the ground, but looking into the air, attempting to shoot down a drone with one of those star shells active could end up leading you to be blinded by your own nods, because they're getting all of that light back in their receptors from that star shell, giving us the understanding that most of these Russian air defenses in the city are most likely blind without these star shells being fired into the bay. We can also see some sort of a puff of smoke here in the middle of the water, which we're unclear as to what caused that, but we can also hear the air defenses continuing to fire in the background. We then got additional footage as well from the western side of the harbor, looking towards the Vostochny Rayon and also the oil pumping station, letting us see some more angles of the air defense fire that was going on within this area. And before we get on into this, we actually have some breaking news coming out of this moment. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so real quick, this is a little bit unusual to cover this right now, but it is something right now that is catching people's attention, it looks like. There's currently a major crisis going on right now in California. Apparently, there's a chemical tank or a chemical facility that's apparently either has blown up or it's about to explode, one or the other. And it looks like it's a 34,000 gallon tank containing something used in plastic manufacturing. And I'm also seeing people say that it's used in manufacturing apparently F-35 canopies as well. That's apparently it's apparently a huge evacuation too. It looks like 40,000 people are currently being evacuated from the area. So that's a pretty big deal happening right now in California.
It looks to have happened in the industrial center of West Anaheim, near to the area of the Joint Forces Training Base Los Alamitos, which we can see right here, just about 2 miles to the west. And at the moment, we do understand that an evacuation has been issued for around 40,000 people that are around this industrial zone, and we can see that there are a large amount of residential suburbs around the area, giving us an idea that this is apparently a significant crisis that is currently unfolding. And unfortunately, this story has developed so quickly, we actually do not know the particular reason as to why this chemical storage tank is ruptured and led to a large release of chemicals apparently used for glazing the canopies of F-35s, not glazing in general, within the area. This is also exceptionally close, mind you all, to Disneyland, which is only about 7 miles to the northeast of this industrial park where the evacuation has been issued at this moment. So we'll be keeping an eye on this story and trying to give you all as many updates as we can, at least for now, on what's going on within this area, but it does appear that there has been a significant ecological disaster and also a threat of toxic fumes being inhaled by the public, and for this reason they're now issuing a mass evacuation. Not really sure how they're going to be handling this. Usually I believe that this would be left to the emergency response teams of the state of California, and we're not really sure what they're going to be doing. When similar sorts of chemical ruptures were seen in East Palestine, Ohio, during a Norfolk Southern Railway derailment where tanks carrying somewhat similar chemicals, but of course quite different when we actually talk about its chemicals in general, however, they actually decided to burn them on location to stop the further spread and seepage of it into the groundwater, which ended up being a very controversial decision. We're not really sure what they're going to be doing in this instance, but we will be keeping an eye on this and giving you all updates as the moments pass. But moving us on out of that major breaking news coming out of West Anaheim at the moment in California, we are going to be returning back into our news out of Novorossiysk in the Russian Federation and the Ukrainian drone attacks that have been conducted over the earlier hours just before we came on air that were absolutely slamming the port and most critical facilities within the area. We can also see here more footage showing the star shell illuminating the sky above in the port. And at the point of this clip, it appears that the air defense had largely gone silent, but fire can visibly be seen somewhere on the western side of the port. We can actually hear
also, by the way, apparently this attack right here was conducted using missiles and drones from the looks of it. So I'm not really sure what missiles were being used in the attack, but it appeared to be some pretty big ones based on the destruction that we saw.
It certainly does appear that they were large. We, unfortunately, folks, never got, I don't think from any of the clips that I saw, any clear footage of a missile being used, but we do know that the BARS missile, which actually does have a pretty decent amount of explosive yield, although it is what we would describe to be a small cruise missile, could have been used, because in prior clips where we saw those being used in Moscow, it appeared that they were fairly quiet and were almost gliding into their targets at the point of the clip. So they may have been gliding in over Novorossiysk, and for that reason, we really didn't get to hear the noise of the engines, and that's why it was very hard to confirm what type of missiles were being used, because nobody was able to hear them to look up and try and visually identify one or film it at a minimum. We also were able to see more of the air defense fire in this clip as well during the ongoing attack. So listen to that. Some classic air defense.
I hear a whole bunch of small arms, but I don't hear missile-based air defenses.
Oh, well, that's real convenient that you mentioned that, Matthew. All that got blown up a month ago. Like, oh, wait, remember during the last attack when the Ukrainians sent a couple of drones down to this air defense unit down here and literally blew up both of the S-400 batteries? Yeah. We have not seen a single missile air defense system used during this attack by the Russians, so we believe that the only missile-based air defense unit, which was this one in Novorossiysk, is most likely completely out of action, and that's why we didn't see any missile-based air defenses during the course of this attack.
Interesting. That would definitely explain it.
It definitely would explain it without a doubt, and we can see them continuing to fire into the area. We can also see this guy filming himself in the dark, which is very unsettling. Oh, we hear the drone. Man, that's crazy right there. The guy filming himself in the middle of the whole thing. He's trying to get some of that internet clout. He's trying to get on that CIA pack. But moving us on out of that, we've also been able to see more footage of the anti-aircraft fire, once again, from the western side of the coast. But this largely appears to be a duplicate, so we'll be moving on from that one and on into the actual oil pumping terminal area, where we were able to see a little bit more definitive footage showing that the fire had most likely occurred on this area and also on the oil storage tanks over the mountainside. We can see a direct hit right there in this just brief clip, which does appear to be directly on the area of the oil pumping station south of the Vostochny Rayon. This has been a critical target for Ukraine to hit, and since the last attacks, Russia has been able to return this facility to a minimal level of operations, and ships have been documented mooring here at this port, loading with oil, and then leaving the area. So we do understand that this oil pumping facility is back online, and that appears to be the primary reason as to why Ukraine has hit and knocked out this oil pumping station. Additionally, we were able to see some more footage of the air defense fire, this time coming from the northern side of the port, looking south towards the area. Listen to that air defense.
Just nonstop. Like they got the disco lights. They've got the. Are those star shells they fired up?
Yes, those are star shells.
Interesting.
Also notice at
I would hate to look out my apartment building at the port and see something like this going on. Like I would probably think about moving out at this point.
Man, you know, a lot of these people are probably having a panic because they're, well, actually, you know, a lot of people in Russia in this town are probably rejoicing, man, because they're probably realizing that the apartment rent per month is probably going to be going down when they have to renew the lease. Like, they're like, yes, yeah, like, keep firing. Every single bullet decreases the price of rent in these apartments probably by 1 ruble. So this is significantly decreasing the rent in these apartments in Novorossiysk. Also note, folks, at this point in the clip, there was a small fire coming from over the mountainside already at this point in the clip, which is showing us that the oil storage facility at Grushevaya Balka had already been hit by the time the air defenses were firing down here near the oil pumping station and the Vostochny, which we can see right there once again, and also the star shells now hitting the water out there in the port, as it sounds like dozens of machine guns are attempting to shoot down the incoming drones. We also have another couple of clips as well showing the hits on the oil depot, or largely the best geolocation that we have at this moment. This clip here does show that fire from over the mountain right there for a brief moment, and we also had this additional clip of a Russian citizen looking directly east across the harbor at those mountains, and we could see the orange glow of the fire there as well. As Exile Nova expertly geolocated, the POV of the camera person is directly within that apartment building and at their direct line of sight, looking across the harbor in those mountains. Chernovaya Balka is right there, meaning that they were looking at the fire that had already been started on the oil storage facility, which we've not been able to directly see in picture evidence yet, but we can confirm by this glowing orange blaze over the mountains that that oil storage facility is most likely heavily on fire at this moment, and this might be a repeat of the Tuapse oil strikes, which also caused irreparable damage to the oil storage facilities in the port of Tuapse.
Also, by the way, apparently a Russian source has just put out some information right now that apparently one of these missiles or one of these drones apparently resulted in a very large fire at an oil depot. And here's what they said. It said the fire occurred on the territory of the oil depot in Novorossiysk due to the fall of UAV debris, which I doubt it's debris. It's probably just a direct hit. So that's what they're saying now. They're also saying that the operational headquarters specified there were no casualties, but, you know, all this stuff's up for debate. That's coming from a Russian source right there. Well, they are confirming that some of the major oil tanks around this location are definitely burning.
And that definitely is a surefire confirmation at this point, folks. We don't even need geolocation anymore. We can confirm that Chernovaya Balka, which is the storage facility, or I'm sorry, Grushevaya Balka, is on fire at this moment. And it appears that from our best geolocations that Exile Nova was able to show on Twitter, it is most likely the central facilities right around here that are also a sub-assembly of the larger pumping station inside the port of Novorossiysk have been hit and are directly on fire. The resulting damage from this this strike could be significant, and it definitely is going to be significant, as pumping facilities are usually some of the most intricate components of these sorts of facilities, and usually the most expensive and timely, I guess you say timely in terms of the cost of time needed to be able to repair them. The fact that the tanks have caught on fire right nearby to this pumping or sub-pumping station right here is giving us a clear indication that the maximum amount of damage has been caused by the Ukrainians, and repairs will most likely take weeks on this facility to be able to get it up to a minimum of operations. We also do not know the extent of how many drones have hit this oil facility and how large sweeping the hits and fires currently are at the moment. All we can see is the fire across the mountain, so we can't really see the base of it, and we can't see how many drone hits have been confirmed that have caused their own fires within the area. But without a doubt at this point, this facility is heavily ablaze and is most likely being seen to have a large amount of damage being inflicted from the resulting fires. And a lot of people at this moment are voicing their opinions on what is going on, in particular, with the Russian port of Novorossiysk being hit and the air defense going wild in the harbor as they try and stop the attacks. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this right now, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so as I was watching this one unfold today, all the clips you just saw right there, I was watching and thinking, dang, Ukraine is going in hard yet again on Novorossiysk, which is wild because they just hit it a short while back, which is what the enforcer just mentioned, where they took out a whole bunch of the missile-based air defenses and also just wrecked the port, just like absolutely wrecked it. This appears to be a somewhat larger attack, even at that. And the big deal about this is Novorossiysk is not only a naval port for the Black Sea Fleet, but it's also, more importantly at this point, a major oil export facility. And now we're seeing that the air defense that they have left, which is mainly small arms fire, pretty much went rogue for a large degree. I mean, we saw a whole bunch of shells being fired at their very own city. They were firing it straight down the beaches of the area. Like, it was really just chaos, as you could see in the videos. But what was Ukraine trying to hit? 66% said Ukraine was likely targeting the Russian oil sites primarily, while 19% said Ukraine was targeting the Russian Navy, and 9% said seems like a 50-50 chance of either of those options. And I am pretty confident that Ukraine is not really worried about the Navy at this point, because, I mean, what really good is the Russian Navy? Not really good for anything at this point. Also, it's been, decimated over the course of years. So they still have a Navy, but that's not the main focus. The Russian oil sites are the main focus, and you might have noticed, like we mentioned, the oil storage depots were definitely struck head on by probably drones or missiles, and now we're seeing them burning, and the Russians themselves even confirmed that. So this is a further campaign against Russian oil, and we're, like the enforcer also mentioned, we're already seeing major gas shortages inside of Crimea. We'll get to that news a little bit later, but it's getting really bad. It's starting to spread across Crimea, and that's because there are so many Ukrainian attacks on the oil inside of Russia that it's finally starting to catch up, and people are starting to feel it. But enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be well within the 66%. The geolocation and also the confirmation by Russian sources is giving us clear indicators that it was the oil facilities that were hit today. The Russian Federation's Navy in Vostochny Raion has been targeted intermittently over the past few years within their moorings, but we have not really seen any significant attacks attempting to destroy the remainder of their service fleet, because they haven't really posed that much of a strategic risk throughout the war. Beyond some of the vessels in the Vostochny being used as stationary cruise missile platforms, able to fire cruise missiles at Ukraine, we haven't really seen them being used for much anything else, because whenever the Russians leave the Vostochny Raion, they're scared that there's a Magura sitting right outside of the harbor that might just come in and beeline for any destroyer that makes it out of the Raion. So generally, we haven't seen that the Russian Navy has been a big enough threat strategically for the Ukrainians to allocate resources to targeting and destroying the remnants of the Russian Navy in the Vostochny Raion. However, we have seen that the Ukraine is continuing on with its strategy of economically depriving the Russians to make it to where they can no longer afford the war. This is something that we've seen over months now, actually well over years at this point. The Ukrainians started these attacks in earnest a long time ago, but in the modern day, we have seen that they are attacking and destroying the very ports of egress that the Russians have to be able to ship their oil overseas. We've seen that the port of Tuapse has been attacked, and of course many people will remember the infamous story of Tuapse when those attacks were conducted just several weeks ago, which led to a fire that was so large and so toxic that many people were concerned that the city was going to be enveloped by the toxic smoke and fire. We've also seen that the port of Taman up here has also been attacked as well, which is another significant oil loading port, and Novorossiysk has been attacked several times as well. That's just mentioning the Baltic Sea Russian oil ports. That's not to mention Primorsk and Ust-Luga, which are within the area of the Gulf of Finland, which have also been hit heavily and damaged significantly by prior Ukrainian drone attacks. These attacks again today are once again trying to achieve those same aims of knocking out these oil loading facilities and making sure that the Russians cannot export oil. This puts their oil loading facilities in significant strain. Not only that, it puts the companies that rely on shipping out their oil to make a profit under significant strain of lost profits, which right now most of these companies are hardly handling the strain and already been conducting mass layoffs and reducing work days over the work weeks to be able to try and stave off the money hemorrhage which is currently being conducted from the major damage. And a lot of people are wondering, well, how major could the damage really be? It couldn't be that bad. I mean, Grushevaya Balka couldn't be a blazing inferno right now as a result of these strikes. Well, we actually had the firm satellite right here to be able to try and take a little look at that. And right now, if we look across the whole of Europe, seems to me like there's just a couple of little fires going on. But let's look at what's going on in Novorossiysk. Oh my god, man.
The whole thing. I mean, literally the entire facility is on fire. I mean, even it looks like even the entrance, like the gate to the thing is even on fire based on that top little part right there. That's crazy. So this entire area, and also, by the way, this is in the hills above Novorossiysk, by the way. So this wasn't accidental. This was definitely a direct intended strike just on that facility right there, that oil terminal. That is wide ranging to say the least.
Let's see. What would this be described if this was a person that was entering the hospital? I think this is like third-degree burns on 90% of the body, if this thing was a person. Like, the only thing that is not on fire right now is the little rail yard up here on the northern end. That's the only thing that is not on fire. Everything else is burning right now.
Okay, so now that we have a reference point here, because we saw those images earlier from this attack, you saw the glowing over the hill. That was apparently Grushevaya. That was apparently what that was. Go grab the Twitter post that OSINT Technical just put out right now, by the way. He actually put the image right next to the firm's data. Go grab that one real quick off of Twitter, because now we have a reference point for what we're looking at. Now we can see it. So there we go. That is the fires up there. What you're seeing is that glowing along the hillside right there. That is Grushevaya, the oil terminal that you're seeing on the firm satellite data that's completely on fire. That's literally why it's glowing like that. All of them are on fire.
I'm trying to find the one by Exile. Yeah, actually, Exile Nova already geolocated this earlier, and I was covering it a little bit earlier, but we were able to see that the sight line from this clip, or more so this picture, was clearly lined up from where the camera person was geolocated. They were looking straight at Grushevaya Balka and the fire happening over there. And I think, folks, the big question is right now, how major is the fire over the hill? Because I need to show you all this, because this is a very important point right now. It's over the hill, so it's actually over the crest of it. So we're not seeing the base of the fire right now, and considering that there isn't really any populated settlements around Grushevaya Balka, we aren't getting any footage of the base of the fire right now to see exactly how many impacts there were. But let me show you all what the actual topography around this area looks like on Google Earth, so that way we can give you all a better idea of what we're looking at here. So let me see if I can orient this to the north and move us on up to Novorossiysk. Here we are, and let me show you all what this looks like in real life. So if we tilt this down, you can actually see that Grushevaya Balka is over the mountain and several hundred feet below the crest in this valley right here. So what we're seeing right now is only the top end of the fire. And honestly, when you think about this, man, you're looking at this, these hills have to be at least 300 or 400 feet higher than where the oil tanks are. So if we're seeing the fire right now above the top of those mountains, and let me show you this here again once more. We are seeing that fire right there, and the fire's base is 400 feet down. That means that the fire columns coming off of this oil facility are at least 400 feet tall at a minimum right now to be able to see them like that.
Yeah, that is something else. I wonder why they decided to put that on the top of a hillside like that. It seems like a strange place to put an oil storage facility. Also, it's like we saw air defense coming from the port, like coming from the areas along the water, but I don't recall really seeing any air defense fire coming out of this location on the side of the hill.
I think we saw some air defense fire coming from down here at the Rayon, but that appears to be the only air defenses they have in the whole city at this point. Is just around the Black Sea Fleet, and they just use that to project over the rest of the port.
That's insane because they put their very, very expensive crude oil storage up here on the side of a hill, and then they don't put any air defense up there on the side of the hill. I mean, it's literally up there, like perched up there like a juicy, perfect target, and they literally put nothing there to protect it. So, I mean, that's top tier Russian for sure.
But I think here we are. I was wondering. So the reason why they put this over the hill, and this is actually a little interesting, is that if you look at the resting elevation of Gruzhevaya Balka and also the oil loading port, this thing is at a minimum about 200 feet higher up in elevation than the actual port. And the reason why they did this is for affordability reasons, because, when you think about it, a water tank in most municipalities is put on a pedestal several hundred feet above the city, so that way it can be gravity fed. The reason why they've done this is to cut down on the cost and also the power needed for their pumping station. So instead of requiring the pumps to force the oil to the port, they can largely rely on gravity and weaker pumps to be able to get most of the oil down to the area of the port. Because if you look right here, this is actually quite interesting. You can see a little tunnel that they've built into the mountain where these pipes enter. And then if you go all the way over here to Gruzhevaya Balka and the pumping station right here, you can actually see those very same pipes making their way into the mountain somewhere around here in that tunnel, and then making their way all the way through this mountain and to the other side to the oil loading port.
Jeez. Is that normal, though? Or is that just something that countries that are broke do because they can't afford pumps?
I think this is something that a country that they call like a broke ass does, because I haven't seen anything like this in like Louisiana or Texas.
Yeah, it seems like pumps wouldn't be that bad expensive, but if it's a country that's sort of low on funds, I guess pumps, maintenance and stuff like that might start adding up quick. So why not perch it right on the top of a hill where it's a juicy target with literally no forces around it? That's even better.
Man, oh my God, man. Hold on, let me see here really quickly. So the resting elevation, if I right click on here somewhere, let's see, get info. This is at an elevation of 273 meters. That would be an elevation of 897 feet above sea level. So let's now go to the top of the mountain, which is right here, and let's get the info from here. So that was about 900 feet down there. What is this? Let's see. Come on, Google Earth. Work with me here. Work with me. Come on. You want to work with me? You don't want to work with me. Why not? Let's see. Come on. I'm right-clicking. It's not wanting to give me the data anymore. Let's see here. Analyze a site. How about, well, it won't. Come on. I mean, that's not right. It gave me the altitude down there. Oh, here we go. So, get the info. Oh my God. So, the oil terminal is at an elevation of 900 feet, right? The top of this mountain is at 1,900 feet. So, that's actually a 1,000-foot difference between the oil storage facility and the top of the mountain that we're seeing here. So, let's put that into perspective. And let's go look at this picture again, right here. That fire has to be 1,000 feet tall to be seen like that over that mountain, because that mountain is 1,000 feet higher than the facility.
Yeah, I think it's an inferno at this point. And that would make sense too, because I mean, looking at that right there, I mean, it's glowing. It also looks overcast. Also, by the way, I just noticed this. I was too busy focusing on the fire. But I mean, what are ghosts and ghouls living in this apartment block up here? I mean, look at this thing. This thing looks like something out of like Fallout 4 or something.
Man, I heard that Scooby-Doo and the gang went into this place and there was some old man haunting his own property and they got his ass arrested. Like, Zoink Scoob, there's tweakers living here. Raggy crocodile. Man. Bro, honestly, man, I think these apartments aren't abandoned. There are people living in them, but, I mean, these are bad. These are Khrushchevkas. Man, rough stuff, honestly. But moving us on out of the Google Earth footage, the firm satellite, and everything else that we have from the port, we can confirm at this point a couple of things. The entirety of the oil loading facility is on fire. The fire tornadoes, basically, from this facility are reaching 1,000 feet into the air at a minimum. And it looks like at the moment, the port of Novorossiysk is probably going to be out of action for months because of how damaging this attack has been. So we can generally scratch Novorossiysk off of the register of an operational oil facility in Russia for the foreseeable future, probably for the next 3 months, I would assume, until they get this thing back into operation. Or they might be lucky. There might be some tanks that are somehow surviving up there in Grushovaya Balka, and they might be able to get the pumping facility up and operational, and in the best case scenario, in about a month. So this facility, at a minimum, is going to be out for a month, and in the best case scenario, it's going to be out for about 3 months to 4. So an incredibly significant hit that the Ukrainians have landed inside of the port. But there's another problem right now that's hitting the Russian Federation. As many of y'all have heard, and many of y'all have been seeing reported on this channel, 25% of Russia's oil refineries have been knocked out at a minimum at this point throughout the entirety of the Russian Federation. Most of these have been knocked out within central Russia, around the Moscow area, or the Moscow military district, but some of them have been knocked out within the Leningrad military district and the southern military district as well. We understand that Russia is hemorrhaging at this point at least 1 million barrels of usable fuel products a day in consumption that they are not able to provide for, meaning that right now there's a significant fuel deficit in the Russian Federation, and we have already seen prior, months ago at the beginning of this year, that fuel shortages were already beginning to reach the far provinces of the Russian Federation and were causing significant amounts of problems. Prices started to skyrocket per liter of gas and diesel, or as they call it in Russia, essence, because that's about all they have left is the essence of decent fuel prices, although that's kind of hitting the United States as well right now. And we're starting to hear that in places like Crimea, it's getting incredibly bad. According to reports today that we have gotten from Russian sources in Crimea, they have stated that currently there are certain logistical difficulties, the reasons for which are known. The government of Sevastopol and the leadership of the Republic of Crimea are doing everything possible to normalize the situation in the shortest possible time. The current situation is as follows. The A10 network gas stations, there is gasoline grades of AI-92 and AI-95, and diesel fuel, but not at all stations. At some TES gas stations, there is 92 gasoline, the delivery of AI-95, and diesel is expected by evening. We are working on this. DT is currently available only by voucher. So you have to have a government-issued voucher to get diesel.
Oh, man, you gotta have that Groupon to go get your diesel off from the station. You gotta have a little coupon with you. This is pretty bad. Like, these never fully came to an end, by the way. Like these shortages, they never fully came to an end, but they are spreading though. They're starting to get more severe inside of Crimea, and I would not be surprised now that we're seeing so many different refineries inside of mainland Russia start to shutter their doors because of these recent attacks by Ukraine. I would not be surprised to see that spread way beyond Crimea. The effects are starting to compound in Crimea pretty quick.
Man, bro, you pull up to a gas station in Crimea, they go, "What would you like?" "I would like diesel, please." "Show your voucher." "I have 1 shilling." Bro, it's like,
man, 1 shilling, man, that ain't get you nothing. You get like maybe a drop.
Man, in this economy, not even a drop. They literally just spit in your gas tank and tell you to get moving. Like, that's all you get for a shilling these days. It's pretty rough. But we also were able to hear as well that they then continued to avoid a rush or a bull run on the gas stations, as last time, we are introducing a measure that has already proven its effectiveness. Fuel sales at TES network gas stations will be limited to 20 liters, which is equivalent to 5 gallons, per 1 car or 1 canister until the situation stabilizes. That is, if you arrive by car, you can choose fill up the car or a canister. If you came with a canister, you can also fill it with fuel. I ask everyone to treat the situation with understanding, and especially important, do not create artificial panic. We're working on resolving the issue, and will promptly inform you of any changes. So if you show up to the gas station right now, you can get 5 gallons of gas at, I think it's something like 100 rubles a liter.
I think that's kind of a ripoff.
That's what they call, especially for a country that makes 5 times less on average per citizen than us as median income, that's what they call getting fleeced. I think, like man, before long, man, everybody in Crimea is going to be wearing fleece because of how much they're getting fleeced down at the gas station to get 5 gallons of gas. Also, on top of that, who in the hell is supposed to be able to travel around on 5 gallons of gas? Like, where in the world does that take you? If a car on average gets 20 miles a gallon, say, and you only get 5 gallons, that means that you only have a range in your car of 100 miles per fill-up. You can't get anywhere with that. That's like basically like town commuting, like maybe 5 miles to work and back for a week, or just using that thing as a grocery runner, and that's it. You can't do anything else with that at all.
Yeah. It's tough. It's this entire war here is getting so bad for Russia and affecting their mainland so much that Ukraine's about to basically set the Russians back to the medieval ages before it's over with. They'll be riding around in carriages and bringing back horses and stuff. I mean, it's really getting ugly. I mean, if it's still staying like this and it's getting worse and it's not getting any better. I mean, and remember, folks, we just heard that like several of the central Moscow refineries, virtually all of them to a large degree, have recently shut down because of the recent attacks in central Russia, and that just happened. And that's in addition to all the export terminals getting hit left and right. And also, Novorossiysk was hit again tonight, which is another export terminal. So yeah, you got to admit, like, it is really phenomenal how Ukraine's ramped up their drone production. You got to imagine, to pull off attacks of this size, virtually daily or nightly, that's wild. That takes a lot of resources to do this nightly. And I would say that proves that Europe and also the UK and these other countries have definitely ramped up their drone production to levels that we've never seen before for Ukraine to pull this off.
Man, I'm not gonna lie, this is rough. Also, man, I like how they whipped out at the end here. Okay, everybody, we're doing well. Don't be a panicking, Blia. Like, bro, they're whipping out the same stuff the U.S. government is doing. Don't panic. Everything is fine, Blia. We're just running out of shit.
They're more worried about people, creating a panic than they are actually fixing the problem. They know they can't fix it. It's like, what are they going to do? Like, stop the drone attacks? You can't stop the drone attacks without starting the war. So, it's like you can't stop it. It's going to continue. The best thing they could do is pretty much pack up and go home, the Russians.
Man, the Russians are out there right now, man. They're going, damn, we can't ship stuff into Crimea because there's not enough diesel and gas. Cut the phone lines. Stop the spread of disinformation. Man, in Russia, man, the people could be starving, but if anybody knows that they're starving, that is the highest priority. Like, that is the highest priority threat, is people knowing how bad it is. If it's bad, that's fine. But if people start talking about how bad it is, then that's where the problem actually exists. The Russian government is here, folks, to fix your problems by telling you that it's not a problem, and if you say it is, they're going to take you to a gulag. They really know how to work it in Russia, making sure to really fix the public's issues by just telling them that it's not an issue, and if they say it is, then you'll be executed. But moving us on out of Crimea, we have also been able to see that Ukraine has been conducting another kind of attack today, one that we can only describe as unbelievable, at least in what it's caused for the Russians. But before we get to that, I want to make sure to talk about this fuel shortage that we've got going on in Crimea. And a lot of people are talking right now about how the Ukrainians are knocking out refineries at such a fast rate. Fuel shortages are becoming a woeful reality of the average day life in the Russian Federation in most places, including in occupied Crimea. And Matthew, what are people thinking right now about the condition and state of these sorts of shortages, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so they're now rationing gasoline, probably worse than ever right now inside of Crimea. And I'm sure in the coming days we'll probably see more of these fuel lines starting to form inside of that area. But now this is as a result of Ukraine finally knocking out so many Russian refineries that they simply cannot manage anymore. The Russians are actually feeling it directly with the gasoline rationing. So how bad is this going to get? 73% said it's going to get very bad. The shortages will almost certainly get worse. 11% said not too bad, Russia will recover as they've done previously, and 8% said it's really being overblown. And it's definitely not being overblown. I'm really surprised it hasn't gotten worse before now, because this isn't the beginning of the attacks. I mean, Ukraine's ramped up their attacks on refineries, but I mean, this isn't new. But I mean, of course, now that we're seeing it get ramped up, we're seeing the rationing start to get extremely severe. But the main sign will be this: the sign that things are getting extremely bad to the point where Russia could be in some actual, existential trouble, is if we start seeing the gasoline shortages reach deep into mainland Russia. If we see that happen, and it goes well beyond Crimea, or like similar we saw about 6 months ago or so, then I think Russia's going to be in a really, really foul shape at that point. And it's coming at a time where Putin's approval rating is already in the dumpster for him, and this authoritarian country, it's in the dumpster. And also, the people inside of Moscow are starting to turn on him because they're starting to get affected daily by these Ukrainian drone attacks. So it's coming at a bad time. This is adding another crisis on top of the Moscow crisis that's already happening. So certainly not good for public opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm with the 73%. The shortage is going to get a lot worse. When shortages like these occur, they are trying their best to be able to conserve fuel resources across the country, but they are still bleeding critical amounts of fuel in places that are not rationing at this moment, which is, at least at this moment, Moscow, St. Petersburg, and a couple of other lucky oblasts and cities in the Russian Federation that are not rationing fuel. This means that they're still seeing a fuel bleed, and the fact that the Ukrainians are knocking out a quarter of all refineries in the country, it's going to be pretty clear that well on into the future, well on in the immediate future, probably in a couple of months, we're probably going to see that fuel rationing is going to hit everywhere in Russia, and critical fuel shortages are going to be a daily fact of life in most parts of the country. So it's not going to be looking all too good for them whatsoever, and honestly, there's just not a lot they can do. They could try and improve their air defenses around these critical facilities, but the Russians at this point had basically attempted to fortify Moscow and Putin's houses, and have basically left everything else to the wolves as far as air defenses go. So that's probably never going to be changing at any point in the future, because we haven't seen it change yet. And so we're thinking that at this point, they're pretty dead set on defending what is pointless to defend, which is just the populated areas of Moscow and Putin's houses. Outside of that, they really don't have any other way to defend or develop a defense against these drones, and so for that reason, this shortage is going to continue to worsen because there's no way that they can stop it at this point. So I hope that does address that the best I can. But there's another thing that Russia is woefully inadequate in being able to defend itself against, and this is something that started to emerge as a new threat as of late, something that hasn't existed throughout most of the war. During the earlier part of the war, when the Crimean Bridge was a major target for the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians were blowing it up in some extent every few months, the Russians started to say, oh, it's okay, comrade, we don't need the Kerch Bridge, we have the land bridge. The land bridge being this occupied area of southern Ukraine that allows for them to just drive right through it to Crimea and to Kherson. So that made the Crimean Bridge not that important, and for that reason, we've never really seen the Ukrainians attack the Kerch Bridge in the modern day, because it's lost a lot of its strategic significance. Not only that, but most of the road traffic and rail traffic that went over the Kerch Bridge for military purposes is now being transported via rail ferry, although all of those have also been destroyed at this point. So most everything has been going over the land bridge to Crimea and Kherson, and this has been about their only supply route. As a matter of fact, the supply route has been so vital that the Russian Federation purpose-built a new railroad main line from Rostov-on-Don and Taganrog through the southern area of Ukraine, through Mariupol and Melitopol, and then into Crimea to be able to connect the Ukrainian railroads that are now occupied to the larger part of the Russian railway infrastructure system, meaning that their military is still able to operate off of their railheads, and that these railheads do not have to cross through the Kerch Strait. They can just cross straight into the land bridge and be able to access the Russian forces and supply them from there. The problem is, however, is that Ukrainian drones, as of late, especially the ones that are able to conduct frontline attacks, have been getting longer and longer in range and loiter time, and are able to deliver a larger explosive force onto whatever targets they're attempting to hit. This has now brought the entire mainline railroad that Russia built from Taganrog to Melitopol under attack, and also the Mariupol to Melitopol highway. This highway is the vital artery of the Russian supply lines that exist by road within this area, and there has been a significant amount of attacks that we were able to document just today that were conducted on Russian vehicles traveling the Melitopol to Mariupol highway from Rostov to Crimea. And here is one of those clips actually showing us a Russian driver driving down the road, and in the midst of him driving, a Ukrainian drone pops up out of the blue about 50 miles to 60 miles behind the lines at the highway, singles out a Russian supply truck and hits it and destroys it in the middle of the highway in broad daylight. Here's the clip. When you see the FPV drone right up there, right above the highways, it's now singling out the vehicle that it's about to attack. It's now losing.
Big FPV drone, by the way. That's a big one.
Man, they are big. Like they're actually pretty sizable and capable of pretty considerable ranges. This is 60 miles behind the lines, and this thing not only was able to get back there, but it was able to loiter around to pick a target. We can now see it closing in on the truck just up ahead. There it is, the Ural, and we can see it explode in the tree line right above the Ural.
Damn, that's crazy. That was a big blast off that thing, man. Are you sure that was an FPV? That looked like a fixed wing.
It's an FPV as in it's a first person drone, but it's very different than the ones we see on the front. These are built for extended ranges, so they do have wings, but from what we know, they're also capable of slow speed loitering flights. We don't really know a lot about them. Like, we haven't seen loads of footage, but we have seen, at least in the clips that we're going to be showing today, that they have a decent different iterations of these things. But this one is fixed wing, but still operated like an FPV.
Yeah, I would say it definitely carries a lot more than an FPV, that's for sure. Imagine if that thing had actually gone straight down the truck and didn't get caught in the tree. I mean, that thing would have been finished.
I mean, honestly, man, you can also see this one Russian soldier right here, man. Like, watch this once this car passes. Look at him, he's down there, bro. He's like, bleah, man, like, and he's about to start running back to the truck. Look at him, bro. He starts running back to the truck.
Oh, jeez. Oh man, that's wild. They can reach this far behind the lines like that. Like that is crazy.
And look at all these civilian trucks, by the way, that are transporting their own goods through the area. This will become important later, by the way. But when you see the Russians trying to hop back in the Ural, these prize Urals, which there isn't many left of, they don't use these on the front anymore because there's so few of them. And then we can also see another insane clip that, believe it or not, folks, came out from Taganrog. Taganrog is in the Russian Federation, mind you all, and if we measure from the closest area of the front to Taganrog, it is 95 miles to the highway out of Taganrog from the current Ukrainian front line right now, give or take a couple of miles. We were able to see that on this highway, the Ukrainians had attacked and destroyed Russian trucks that were involved in the transportation of supplies and equipment for the Russian army, 95 miles behind the lines.
That is bad. Also, that's very bad, by the way, because as people have pointed out since the beginning of the war, if you don't have good logistics, you cannot fight a proper war. It's just the way it works. If you can't move food, supplies, weapons, ammo in an efficient manner, then it doesn't matter how many men you throw at the problem. It's not going to be fixed because they won't have ammo to fight with, and they won't have food either. They'll be basically starving while they're fighting. So, I mean, this is literally getting at the root of the problem that Ukraine's going for with this one. Instead of just fighting the troops head on, they're actually just going back to the root and literally catching all the supplies before they even get to the front. So that's really bad.
As Napoleon once said, an army marches on its stomach, which back in the day was a pretty true claim. It still is, because people have to eat. But soldiers also have to have bullets to shoot, shells to fire, and also vital equipment to be able to keep up their combat operations outside of engaging and fighting the enemy, which involves everything with normal life. And the fact that the Ukrainians are now hitting Russian supply trucks 100 miles from the front is making it to where Russia is completely incapable of protecting and fortifying their supply lines. In recent years, we have seen that drones were able to reach about 20 and 30 miles behind the lines, which were already becoming a major threat, but the Russians were able to try and mitigate some of the threat by building drone net roadways in the area to where the roadways were protected by large nets that covered the entirety of their length, which would stop most Ukrainian drones from being able to hit the vehicles until those nets were burned or destroyed enough to where they cease to exist and then they get attacked through the gaps. Now we're seeing that the Ukrainians have such a long attack range, Russia would either have to fortify and protect every single road within this area, the thousands of miles of them, all the way from the front to 100 miles away to Taganrog, which they cannot do, or they're just going to have to accept that most of their supplies are going to be destroyed before they even make it close to the front, which is going to be increasing the amount of logistical inefficiency because most of the supply tonnage is not even going to be getting close to the front. So that means that also the amount of supply trucks and vehicles that can be destroyed is far larger because the Ukrainians also have a much wider catchment area. This is going to be causing critical failings for the Russian Federation's armed forces within Kherson and Crimea, which are entirely relying on this land corridor right now to be able to get supplies. Also, I have to point out, folks, that even in the modern day, the Russian army has a critical shortcoming. And the critical shortcoming is that the Russian army does not have a built-in logistics force like the US or Western militaries have here in NATO. In NATO, we bake into the force structure a large logistical component. And this is what keeps our armed forces running. From the very moment that the Army receives the supplies here in the United States, it is handled by one of the armed forces all the way to the point that it's distributed to the frontline troops or frontline sailors on a ship, the troops on land, or the airmen at the air bases overseas, meaning that we have complete and total control over our logistics. On the other hand, Russia does not have that kind of built-in logistics force even now. At the beginning of the war, they didn't have it. And how Russia deals with that is by hiring out civilian contractors which is absolutely insane. And the civilian contractors have it written into their contracts, and we've seen that they have exercised these clauses a million times in the war, that they will not deliver supplies to places that are hard to reach or dangerous for their employees. And we have seen that that has caused huge issues because most of the Russians' logistics, is somewhere around 60%, is handled almost entirely by civilian contractors, almost all the way up to the front line itself. And most of the time, it will never get dropped off directly at the front. They have to drop it off somewhere way far behind, to where the frontline unit has to retreat, basically, grab the equipment, and then bring it back up for the rest of the unit. So right now, we're understanding that the Russian government, because of the fact that civilian contractors are now finding the risk too great to ship the Russian military's equipment into Kherson and Crimea, have issued the following decree today. This is the original decree right here, by the way, in Russian. This is the English translated decree, which we'll be reading for you all in full. In accordance with paragraphs 3, 6, and 8 of the decree of the President of the Russian Federation on October 19, 2022, number 757, on measures taken in the constituent entities of the Russian Federation in connection with the decree of the Russian Federation of October 19, 2022, number 756, in order to ensure the safety of transit road transport through the territory of the Kherson region. The President of Russia has decreed, or generally the authorities have decreed, to introduce a temporary restriction on the movement of freight vehicles on the section of the Federal Republic Highway number 280 Novorossiysk from kilometer 463 to 300 kilometer and from 494 kilometer to 0 in the direction of the Dzhankoi automobile checkpoint from 0000 on the 21st of May of the year until further notice, with the exception of freight vehicles carrying military cargo, special cargo, essential pharmaceutical products, as well as equipment for infrastructure and restoration, gasoline, diesel, and other types of fuel, and perishable goods in accordance with Appendix Number 1 to this decree. 1.4 certain types of socially significant essential food products in accordance with Appendix Number 2 to this decree. This means that most Russian civilian contractors are probably about to get axed out of the Berdyansk highway, because Highway 280 right now, as it's called, is actually the one that goes from Mariupol to Melitopol, and from Melitopol into the area of Kherson, which is on the M14, as it's called by the Ukrainian armed forces. So that means that right now, the most important highway for ground transportation in this area is about to get shut down completely. It's already been partially shut down right now. It's probably about to get shut down to the civilian contractors here soon, because the civilian contractors are probably going to use this decree as a reason to explain that it's now too dangerous for their employees to travel this route, and they're not going to be delivering the supplies any longer. This is almost becoming a complete collapse of the Russian supply lines, and a lot of people are actually talking about that at this moment right now in the poll. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so this is actually a pretty big story right here. I've not seen too many people talking about it today, but I mean, this is a very big deal, because if logistics start to become troubled inside of Russia in the occupied territories, that could hamper all the frontline efforts, literally from the top to bottom. So now that we've seen that Russia suspended all traffic on the main highway that we were just talking about due to recent strikes, what do you think is going to happen as a result of that? 63% said Russian logistics have essentially failed at this point, and that they're trying to basically pick up the pieces. 18% said Russia will find new routes soon, and 13% said Russia will install drone nets very soon, and that'll fix their problem. So Russia has been installing drone nets. That is not really working the way they hoped it would work. And also, by the way, these drones that are coming in have such large payloads and are heavier drones. They're not just normal FPVs. They're larger ones, like we just saw a moment ago. They're fixed wing aircraft. They're able to generally penetrate some of the drone nets. So that's not really working that well. Also, there's really not a new route to pick, because they picked that route because it was the easiest one to get from point A to B to get the supplies to the troops. So there's really not a new route to pick. So I would say at this point, Russian logistics have essentially failed along this area, and I don't really see how they're going to fix it, because they really weren't expecting Ukraine to be able to hit their logistics trucks this far back behind the lines, and they really didn't prepare for it, which is also very Russian, by the way. They don't prepare for any contingencies to a large degree, but this was one right here that you didn't want to ignore, because if your logistics fail, your frontline efforts are going to fail. So I think we're going to start seeing a very gradual weakening along the front, as the forces are not getting probably fed properly. They're probably not getting armed properly either. And this comes at a time where Ukraine's pushing back the Russians in this area. So it seems like a perfect storm, really. But Enforcer, what say you?
Russian logistics have been in a very tough situation and have technically failed on the front for years at this point. But at this point, we're seeing a critical system-wide failure. It's not within a particular region or a particular area. Literally within the entirety of the theater, logistics are beginning to collapse at this point because once the Russians drive within 100 miles of the front, those supply trucks are now actual targets and can be hit and destroyed by the Ukrainians with relative ease at a great affordability. So this means that at the moment, the Russian army, which once again relies on a volume of fire to be able to suppress the Ukrainians and attempt to conduct any advances, are not able to suppress the Ukrainians because they're not able to get enough ammunition to the front. They can't really get any food to the front. They can't conduct any medical evacuations or medical support to the front because those will most likely also be hit as well because the Russians have not really respected I guess you could say, sanctity of medical evacuations front, so the Ukrainians haven't been respecting them for years either. The Russians are not able to get anything up to the front at this point. As a matter of fact, even if the Russians try and bring armor into the area, the very scarce amount that they have left, the Ukrainians could target the transport trucks that are hauling the tanks on a trailer and knock them out 100 miles away from the front. Meaning that tank would then have to drive down the road 100 miles, which is generally a bad idea for fuel efficiency, which the Russians are already scarce on fuel, to be able to make it to the front. And even then, it could be attacked at any point by a drone and destroyed before it even makes it a couple of miles from the front. It could be 90 miles away and get hit by another drone and then completely knocked out and destroyed. This is making the situation untenable for the Russian army supply-wise, particularly right now within Kherson, which is a very important front to speak of, and the Zaporizhzhia region. This area is where the Surovikin line is that the Russians set up way back in 2023 during the Ukrainian summer offensive, and if the Ukrainians are ever able to outmaneuver or able to emphasize superior firepower doctrine against the Russians and suppress them and then isolate them and destroy them in detail, they may be able to break through and start racing rapidly towards Crimea. And then once Crimea ends up being cut off from the land bridge, which is really their last hope even in the current state that they're in right now, there isn't really any effective route of retreat for the Russian forces left in Crimea, unless if the Ukrainians somehow stopped right at the Chonhar and Armyansk gap and allowed for the Russians to slowly retreat with their forces across the strait and back into Russia, which is probably what would end up happening because these areas of the Armyansk and Chonhar gap are pretty significant bottlenecks, so it'd probably take a time for the Ukrainians to be able to get through that. Still, it is showing that Russian logistics have failed, and within the particular area that they are failing the worst, this could lead to the Ukrainians having a windfall battlefield success against the Russian Federations in some against the Russian Federation in some sort of a future offensive. But with that, I hope we've addressed this story well, which I have to say, folks, is an unbelievably major one in its implications for what might happen to the Russian army within this area. And I have to say, positive news like this good, has not come out in a while. But we're going to be moving on for a little while out of Europe and on into the Middle East. I'll also cover some of the news that we have been able to hear out of the Iran war today. And we have some pretty big news coming out of that area. But before we move on into that news, I do want to say a humongous thanks to everybody who has been watching the stream so far tonight. Over the course of the night, we have had a peak viewership of 15.6 thousand people over the course of this entire stream, and 60,000 people have watched in the first hour in 10 minutes. And I'm going to say that we're entirely honored and greatly appreciative of so many of y'all continuing to come here and get your news from this channel. We're very honored to know that a lot of y'all consider this channel to be a primary source of news, and I hope that tonight we've been able to make sure that our news and analysis has been top-notch and high rate, at least in terms of the kind of news we're covering and the analysis and background behind each piece of news and what it means in the bigger picture, because we pride ourselves greatly on trying to provide the highest quality news that y'all are able to hear of what's going on the ground. Before we move on into the rest of the news, I do want to take a quick minute to get to thank y'all for y'all's time being here, like we just did, and also answer a couple of questions. We're going to be taking 3 from the chat, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news from around the world, from the Middle East, from the United States, which is basically all one big story, and then also all the rest of the news that we got out of Europe today and the war in Ukraine. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so let's jump into our first super chat, which goes to none other than Chillin Kavakin. And thank you very much, Chillin, for that
Hey!
$100 support, by the way. Very generous support, and that is the largest super chat of the night. And we genuinely do appreciate it, and generally too. But Chillin said, none other than Bob had a good question that's too good not to super chat. And it said, theoretically, Russia uses a nuke on Kyiv. Will anyone come to Ukraine's aid? And is it either Europe's or the USA's humane responsibility to respond with nukes?
And I thank you so much for the unbelievably humongous support to the channel and helping this thing to keep running. And to answer the question, which is actually a pretty good one, I would say that it's a bit up in the air. As far as the United States is concerned, I don't think the United States would respond to anything that Russia does at this point, because the current administration is showing a significant amount of deference to the Russians in a way that we can't even explain in any way rather than just coming up with accusations. So I would believe that the U.S. wouldn't respond to anything that Russia does and would generally try and explain it away or just downplay it to the larger part, meaning that most of the burden of response would be on Europe itself if there was any kind of response. Europe is, of course, a lot stronger than some people give them credit for. Some people say that Europe is completely weak and pointless, but I think those people are not really, well tuned to what Europe is. Europe is the largest military force conventionally and in terms of nuclear arms in the world, second only in conventional force to the United States, and third only in the world to the nuclear arsenals of the Russian Federation and the United States. Meaning that Europe does have a lot of significant power of its own to be able to leverage against a country like Russia if they did nuke a city like Kyiv. The problem is, however, is that we do not know the political willpower within these countries to be able to conduct a strong response or any sort of an armed response to the Russian Federation, regardless of what they do. We've already seen that the Russian Federation has conducted very aggressive actions over the past year against a lot of frontier NATO states, including Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Romania, which have seen that drones that are armed have either impacted in major cities, flown well within their airspace, or that the Russian Federation has made specific comments through their ambassadors to these countries, i.e. Romania, that they are in a state of war with the Russian Federation. So, with that in mind, and the fact that we haven't really seen any significant responses from NATO so far to any of these provocations, and we've seen some strong words here and there, but no legitimate action, it's really hard to say how they would respond. If anyone is going to respond in the whole of Europe, the chances are fairly high that it would probably be the French. Currently, Emmanuel Macron's government in France is trying to lead the charge of being the head of an independent European sphere of influence if push came to shove. And we've also seen that France has been offering and has been working to extend their nuclear defensive umbrella to other nations within the region, like the Republic of Poland. The fact that France is becoming so forward in coalition defense in Europe is giving us an idea that if anybody would respond and anybody would have the confidence to respond, it would highly likely be them. They have a significantly well-armed conventional force, land, air, and sea, and they also have a very competent nuclear defensive force as well, with about 400 nuclear warheads. So they could definitely respond. The problem is, though, is would they? And also would they have a lot of international support? Because France would probably be willing to make a response to that and also threaten the Russians within an inch of their life to not even take that sort of an action. But they would probably only do that if they had enough international support from the other European states that are either quite significant economically and militarily, or they're nuclear armed like Britain. And I don't really know how that would go, because to be entirely honest, Starmer's government in Britain says a lot of things that sound pretty good when it comes to foreign policy, but follow-through is non-existent, unfortunately. We've seen that there's been a lot of strong statements that sounded very good in practice, like Britain was going to start intercepting Russian shadow tankers near Britain's waters and just seizing them outright, and then once the Russians showed them down in the English Channel, they've completely backed off of that and didn't follow through whatsoever. So it's really unclear whether the British will follow through, because they say a lot of good things, but follow through on almost none of them. Germany and Poland would probably follow along, but they're not nuclear armed. They're just well armed conventionally, and also pretty significant economic players within Europe at this moment. But beyond that, they're not nuclear armed, so they'd still be leaning on France for the nuclear muscle if it ever came down to that. So I would say generally there is a chance but it relies on the last minute decision in the central leadership of most European nations that would see if any kind of a response would ever actually be given. So I think that's about the best answer I could give to that question. It's actually a pretty in-depth one, and it's hard to gauge a final answer, and that's why I'm kind of having to hedge the claims on if this happens and if that happens, this might happen, because right now we're not seeing clear answers from anyone that are being followed through with significantly from anywhere in the world, in the United States or even in Europe. So it would really rely on the last minute decision of these leaders, which is very hard to guess because it could be a 50-50 and go either way. So I hope that does answer the question the best I can, considering all those variables. And a humongous thanks to you so much once again for supporting the channel and helping us to keep this thing running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you who went out of your way to support this channel, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, to be on air every night and keep our lights on to keep these computers running, and we also wouldn't be able to make it possible for the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who watch every month to be able to consider this channel their primary source of news. So a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that has addressed that well, and with that, we're on to the next one.
Our next one goes to Cliff H. And thank you very much, Cliff, for that $51 support. And we do appreciate that very much. Very generous. That is the second largest super chat of the night. And Cliff asked the enforcers, would you rather A, invade Iran led by very bad military leadership and let the chips fall, or B, declare some type of paper victory and withdraw, leaving the thorny issues of freeing the strait and nukes for later? And I would definitely not take option B. Definitely not. If I was in charge right now and I was given this choice, I would say invade Iran's islands in Hormuz, or do something militarily, take direct military action to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And with the main focus being the Strait, not, simply just carpet bombing Iran just for the hell of it, but specifically going in to get that strait reopened. I would do that without hesitation if I was in charge at this point, because originally we kind of had an option. Like, we had an option to say, would an invasion of the islands be wise? Maybe, maybe not. Now we've gotten to the point where the situation has gotten so dire, with all these mines being laid in the strait, also Iran literally developing their own port authority to take control of the strait. They're not letting it go at this point. They've made it perfectly clear. So there's only one move, and it's to go in, pretty much blazing at this point. And that's what I would do. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that option B would be pretty bad. I would honestly say that option B would be bad for the United States in a million ways. One, it would be giving a significant sign of weakness. Basically, any kid on the block at this point could beat the hell out of the United States, and that's the kind of message that we would be giving to the world, which would not be a good one, because a lot of countries that would have thought in the past that they could not stand a chance against the United States might think that they can, and if they think that, we could start ending up getting in a lot of wars that are thrown on us, because a lot of countries are now feeling very confident, and we might win a lot of them, but we're still getting tied up in fighting a whole bunch of smaller wars, because a lot of countries are going to start testing our abilities and our limits, because they watched how well the Iranians were able to pull it off. I would also have to say that another additional reason is that if we try and walk away and the Iranians still control the strait, at any given point in time, the Iranians could simply just shut down the strait again, and they have the authority and the control at that point to be able to do such a thing. And so really for those two reasons, not getting into all the 5 different reasons that I would have, it wouldn't really be a good idea. Bad military leadership, as far as civilian leadership goes, is bad leadership, and unfortunately, it's just what we have to deal with at this point. And the reality of that also is, because this is kind of like, cutting through all the weeds of trying to, smooth talk it here and everything, just being honest, a lot of U.S. service members are probably going to end up getting wounded and killed because of the bad civilian leadership that's currently in charge that doesn't really understand logistics, strategy, or good planning. But nevertheless, that's kind of where we're stuck at this point, because if we walk away, the situation is going to be as bad as if we were truly militarily defeated, and our only way to reverse this situation right now is to get involved on the ground and to actually conduct military action, seizing the islands within the strait and trying to forcibly restart passages through the Strait of Hormuz, hell or high water. If we aren't able to do that, we might as well say that the U.S. economy is going to be going downhill rapidly, and we're also going to be seeing that the United States will probably start to lose its status as a global superpower pretty quickly, and will just become a great power like the People's Republic of China, because of the economic damage that will come to follow, because we did not take the actions necessary, regardless of the losses at that short period of time, to be able to mitigate the damage. So I would have to say that unfortunately it would have to be answer A, because otherwise it's going to end up being a lot worse. And also, I gotta say, folks, this is a bit of a cautionary thing. about picking certain kinds of leaders for civil administration. Civil leaders for in an administration are always looked at as it won't be that bad and they can't really screw up too badly. But they can screw up pretty badly, and to be able to fix the screw ups that now are necessary to fix, it could come at the cost of many American lives that will end up being wounded or killed overseas to be able to fix the original errors that were made literally in the opening days of the conflict. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And a huge thanks to you for support, Cliff H, and being around for an incredibly long time and helping this channel to keep on running and supporting this thing and making it possible. And so humongous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news for the night. So what do we got?
All right, so this one goes to Moidy Movies, who puts in a $50 support as well. And thank you very much, Moidy, for that 50, and we do appreciate that very, very much. That is the third largest super chat of the night. And Moidy said, you guys are really good. And thank you, by the way. He said, it would have been nice if the main mass media had even a fraction of the knowledge and intelligence. Also, a very high praise. Thank you for that. He said, but unfortunately, this is not the case. So keep up the good work.
Thank you so much for the kind words, Morning Movies. We thank you. Also, you've been around for a long time. We thank you so much for still being around and enjoying the channel and supporting it. But I also have to say that mainstream news isn't really able to do this because they just get talking heads that can read off of a teleprompter and look pretty while they do it. And so generally a lot of those talking heads on mainstream don't really have a deep understanding of what they're talking about. They kind of have a superficial understanding, and then they have to be spoon-fed what they need to know, and that means there's a lot of deficiencies in their knowledge on the topics that they speak of. Also, on top of that, in mainstream news, they generally try and talk down to the audience to the lowest common denominator intelligence-wise, meaning that they have to dumb everything down to the simplest points. And that's why you don't really get anything of substance on mainstream TV, is because they're trying to talk to their dumbest viewer. And here on this channel, I think that that's completely pointless. Like, people either have to educate themselves to get up to speed with everybody else, but I don't really think that talking down to an audience like everybody is ignorant is ever a good move, because it just keeps everybody uneducated and it doesn't really address the meat of the topics that we're talking about, which are very significant, have a lot of moving elements to them, and on top of that, are not really something that you can just say as black and white, clear as crystal on every single thing this is going to be clearly right with no consequences, and this is basically the work of the devil. It just doesn't work like that in foreign policy, although sometimes I will say, folks, that there is some things that are black and white, like the Strait has to be reopened, but most of the other times, you work in percentage chances, you work in probabilities, hypotheticals, which is something that I kind of find funny, because a lot of people will always say, well, some people, not a lot, but some people say in the chat, oh, you're working on what ifs and hypotheticals. It's like, well, that's analysis. Like if we ever had an answer where we're like, this is 100% what's going to happen, we're bullshit artists at that point, because there's no way to say 100% that anything's ever going to happen. It's always in percentage chances. But a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running, because if it wasn't for folks like you and your support, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to try and give the most accurate news that we can to all of y'all who are watching right now. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again, and with that, it is time for us to move on and into the rest of the news for the night, as we have significant news that has come out of quite literally everywhere else in the world, especially from the Middle East, before we get back to Ukraine. Moving us on into the Middle East, we of course have been able to hear of some significant developments today about the possibility of a peace deal. And before we even get into this, folks, today it looks like we're getting into a war here in the near future. However, we never know if this is going to be the case. We have been faked out so many times at this point on the developments that are coming out of the Middle East that there is no guaranteed or certified way to say that a war is going to start or not. We can work, like I just said a minute ago, off of possible percentage chances given the current picture of what we're seeing on what could be happening here within the near future, but once again, that's not any guarantee, because we've seen over the past month and a half that absolutely nothing is guaranteed with the situation in the Middle East, and we have no clue where it's going. I don't really think anybody knows where it's going at this point. So, moving us on into that news, with with that disclaimer out of the way, we have been able to hear that over the course of the day, talks are remaining at an absolute deadlock. The Pakistani-mediated peace talks between Iran and the United States have remained completely deadlocked as each side has continued unreconcilable maximalist demands, according to Al Jazeera, who was able to speak to sources privy to the talks at this moment. This is giving us an understanding that, as usual, the talks are going absolutely nowhere, and we have been getting no indications at this point that the talks are going to be progressing at all. Right now, it appears that everybody's on the same page, that the sticking points are the control of the Strait of Hormuz and nuclear weapons. The Iranians are not willing to relinquish their nuclear weapons and development programs and completely abolish them and destroy them, and they're also not willing to relinquish their control of the Strait of Hormuz, which is a very significant negotiating chip for the Iranians, as they are able to economically punish the United States and the Western world for them conducting the war against Iran in the first place, which means that they are definitely not going to be relinquishing that of their own free will. We've also been able to see that at the moment there was reports today coming out from White House officials who remained anonymous that the current administration was preparing Friday for a fresh round of military strikes against Iran, according to sources with direct knowledge of the planning, even as diplomacy continued. No final decision on strikes had been reached as of the afternoon of this Friday, and according to some, circumstances pertaining to government are keeping the president from attending his son's wedding this weekend, and also he stated that in a social media post. The president had planned to spend Memorial Day weekend at his golf property in New Jersey, but will now be returning to the White House. We were able to hear some very significant developments, speaking of this, out of Washington, D.C., to hop right over into our American developments, which pertain to this situation directly. We were able to hear that some senators within the Congress, like Senator Roger Wicker, were stating the following statements today, and this is one of several, but we have seen several similar statements to Wicker's over the course of the day. We are at a moment that will define the current president's legacy. His instincts have been to finish the job he started in Iran, but he's being ill-advised to pursue a deal that would not be worth the paper it's written on. Our commander-in-chief needs to allow America's skilled armed forces to finish the destruction of Iran's conventional military capabilities and reopen the strait. Further, the pursuit of an agreement with Iran's Islamist regime risks a perception of weakness. We must finish what we started. It is past time for action. So it is showing that
good for him for saying that right there. Also, by the way, I'm not really sure who is the one advising to make a deal. It's like, Israel is definitely not saying that. Israel wants to go back to war. Also, I don't think the Secretary of State's saying that either. The Secretary of State keeps sort of like putting out doubtful statements that a deal could even be reached in the first place. Also, we know, like, for example, Lindsey Graham, he definitely wants to go back to war for sure. So I'm not really sure who's advising otherwise at this point. It seems like it might be self-motivated by possibly the president that he doesn't want to go back to war. I can't really tell.
It's really hard to say because, like, almost every other day, folks, we're hearing, like, I would say at this point, almost flat out lies. Because one day we'll be hearing that Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Kuwait are encouraging the United States to go back to war, and then the next day, some people, something that sounds like Axis, a certain publication, will then say the peace is right around the corner. It's only a few hours away, and everybody in the Middle East doesn't want a war and they want a deal. Something along those lines. And I would have to be honest with y'all, folks, we've heard that from so many different angles that everybody wants war and then they don't want it, that we don't actually know who in the world is the group asking for there to be no continuation of the war. And also, whoever those people are, they've got to be dumb as rocks. I mean, what do they expect? That the war isn't going to restart and everything magically returns to normal? I mean, that would be like in the middle of World War II, the United States going, you know what? I think we've given Hitler and the Japanese enough run for their money. We're just going to pack up and walk off, and I'm sure all this will end up fine and dandy. Who in the hell would ever think that? Like, if you get up, folks, and just walk off in the middle of a war, you are asking to be absolutely defeated with what's going to come afterwards. You're giving the enemy breathing room and ability to react at that point. That is a bad idea, and we've given the Iranians a month and a half of that, and have done nothing to them yet. And clearly a lot of people in the Senate, like Roger Wicker, are making it incredibly clear that they're of our mindset that it is past time for action and we need to be returning to the conflict because we're clearly not going to be able to negotiate anything of substance with the Iranians. We've clearly found that out over the past month and a half. And a lot of people are also talking before we get into this poll, about the fact that the president's schedule was completely wiped over this weekend. He'll not be attending his son's wedding, and he also won't be going to Bedminster to the golf course to smack around a couple of balls. He'll be staying in Washington, D.C., and just hanging out there for a little bit. Also, I just realized how badly that came out. Like, that wasn't meant. That wasn't meant. I was literally meaning, like, the golf balls, but it came out the way it was, so I guess there's no rebutting on that. But we've also been able to hear, additionally, to get into a couple of things that are also showing us the possibility that a war is coming back around, that the UAE is now engaging in GPS jamming to prevent Iranian drones from entering their airspace. We've also seen this spoofing visibly seen on flight radar, as we have about 30 aircraft of every type just sitting right around Zagat on the Arabian border. And we've also been able to hear, additionally, that this is the current GPS disruption map within the area. Notice, importantly, how most of the GPS disruption is being conducted near Khor-Fakkan and Fujairah, which are the targets that the Iranians hit the most. We can also see that there's GPS jamming happening just north of Qatar and also around Kuwait City. So it looks like a decent amount of Gulf states have been getting heavily involved in GPS spoofing to be able to try and prepare themselves for stopping or thwarting Iranian attacks here within the near future. We've also been able to hear that in the midst of this all, just to put this out there, the UAE has joined Saudi Arabia and Qatar in urging the president not to restart the Iran war and allow more time for negotiations. Gulf leaders warned that renewed fighting could trigger retaliation and destabilize the regional economy. This also, by the way, is coming off the cusp of the news we heard a day ago, where we heard that all three of these countries were urging the United States to get back to the war. So I'm heavily doubting and discrediting this claim, because it can't be both. It has to be one or the other, and I'm assuming that they probably want the war to resume, because they're already being economically destabilized and damaged by the blockade. So what further damage could Iran conduct at this point that would damage them any further than the blockade that's stopping all of their oil from being sold? That's something that would be beyond my understanding. But a lot of people are currently talking right now about what is going to be happening, as it does appear that all of these actions are heavily indicating, also on top point, before we get to this, I have to get to one more thing. The Iranians did shut down their airspace over the entirety of the western part of the country and have issued a NOTAM stopping all flights within that area. We also saw that the Qatari delegation, which was supposed to stay in Tehran for a couple of days longer, has already departed and is leaving Tehran at the quickest haste they can.
Yeah. That's a big one right there. When I saw that happening earlier, I was like, what the heck? I was like, the Qatari delegation is just literally like, and they're taking the fastest way they possibly can out of Iran. Like, they literally took the fastest way to get out of Iranian airspace as quick as they could. They were supposed to stay there until Sunday, and it's obviously Friday. So they left a little bit early. They left really quick. And I wonder if the Iranians kicked them out, or maybe they were tipped off to leave quick or something. But I mean, this is literally fleeing Iran is what this is.
It literally is, and it's very odd. Also, by the way, folks, we do have to point out that the reports of jet activity over Karaj weren't anything crazy. It was actually, it wasn't scrambling jets over Karaj. Turns out that these aircraft were actually launched from, I believe it was the, what the hell is it called? It's the airport in Tehran right here. The Mehrabad International. Yeah, they were launched from Mehrabad, and they were actually an air escort for the Qatari envoy that was leaving at that point on their A320. So it wasn't any sort of combat activity. It was just a combat air escort for the aircraft to get it on out of Iranian airspace. So that's what we were able to confirm, because the timing of the Qatari aircraft taking off and these MiGs being quote-unquote scrambled was quite literally simultaneous, and it does appear that these were a part of the escort for the Qatari aircraft. So at the moment, we can get a pretty strong indication by all of these factors from the U.S. side, the Gulf state side, the Iranian side, everyone's side, that there seems to be some sort of tremors that might be leading us to believe that there is a chance for war coming this weekend. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so now that we've seen that Iran has closed their airspace until Monday, by the way, that's a big move right there. Also, the Gulf states have begun GPS jamming across the Persian Gulf, they say, because they're trying to get ready to defend against possible Iranian drone attacks. So those are pretty clear signs on their own, but we have several more that I'll get into in just a second. But what do you think about this? What is about to happen? 42% said Iran attacks are likely coming during the Memorial Day weekend, which is this weekend. 31% said the U.S. U.S. is simply using all these theatrics as a bluffing tactic. 20% says there's a 50-50 chance of attacks very soon. And I would say this, folks. We have been burned so many times trying to predict the actions of the current leadership that I really don't think we can predict that with certainty. All I can say is there are a lot of indicators that seem like an attack could be imminent this weekend, but there's always the unpredictability of the leadership. So I'm with the 20%. It's a 50-50 chance of the attacks happening soon, but there are at least 6 very strong indicators that something could happen. Number one, Iran issued its highest level of military alert. Iran also confirmed that there is a complete deadlock on all the major issues that the U.S. is currently negotiating with the top Iranian leadership. They also, like I mentioned, closed its western airspace. The UAE begun signal jamming. Qatar's delegation, as we just saw from the flight data, literally fled from Tehran this morning, like booked it out of the territory like they were like a scalded dog, basically, the way they got out of that territory. Also, the U.S. president suddenly cleared his schedule. He stopped golfing, and also he's missing his son's wedding this weekend. So those are pretty strong indicators, but I would say 50-50 chance. But Enforcer, what say you?
50-50. I honestly, folks, I would say that the percentage chance with all of these signals is probably pretty decent that a war could happen this weekend or it could restart this weekend. But once again, folks, we just don't know. It's Friday, though. The markets are now closed for the weekend, and we always know, everybody, that for a war to start, it cannot affect the stock market, and God forbid it hurts those innocent shareholders that are struggling to feed their families. So they will definitely be conducted on a weekend. But which weekend, we don't know. It might be this one. It looks like everything's lining up for it. The Iranians have issued a NOTAM, which is showing that they might be expecting some sort of a conflict to start, and for most of the air war to be fought in the western airspace of their country again. We're also seeing that the president's canceled the schedule. We're seeing that there's a lot of GPS spoofing from Gulf states just starting today. We've also seen that at the same time, which we didn't cover right now, but we should have covered, that the Israelis are now bombarding Hezbollah at a much higher rate than normal, at least over the past several weeks. And we've also seen that talks are once again at a deadlock. Also, by the way, I forgot to mention, but today is the end. And I guess the president forgot this one, but of course, many things he has to think of, like that golf event. But outside of that, this is the end of the 72-hour deadline that was issued 3 days ago that the Iranians have to make a deal by. Otherwise, we're going to start bombing them, and we're not going to be very nice about it, quote unquote. It's the end of 72 hours, and I'm not seeing anyone bombing Iran yet. So, considering that every single other threat has never been followed through on, there's no reason to believe that this one should have been followed through on. But the 72-hour deadline did come to a close today, and that might be leading us to believe that there might be some sort of strikes coming up this weekend. So, to be entirely honest with y'all, I'd say there's a 50-50 chance. There's a good percentage chance it could be happening, but we're just not entirely sure. Someone might wake up tomorrow and just, have like a panic attack and decide not to do it, and then they don't follow through with it, and then we wait another couple of weeks to see what's going to be happening then. So, I hope that does address that the best we can. Also, by the way, another thing, folks, it's probably not going to be happening while we're live on air, because right now it's broad daylight in Iran, and most of every attack that we have ever seen that has been conducted on Iran is conducted during the early morning hours. The U.S. loves to attack at night because it gives them a humongous advantage against most of our adversaries, and also on top of that, there's a slight chance that the attack could be conducted in the very early morning, but the only time we ever saw the U.S. do that was when we bombed Khamenei in Tehran, and that's because the meeting was in the early morning and there was no other choice but to do it then. Every other time we attacked at night. So there we have that as well. So it's definitely not going to be happening in the next several hours because it's a break of dawn right now. Well, more so it's the morning hours over there. If anything, it's going to be happening in the afternoon American time on Saturday evening or Saturday afternoon, or it's going to be conducted on Sunday afternoon. That's the highly likely chance, if it happens this weekend, when it will probably be happening. But moving us on out of that, we do have a lot of other news that came out of the Middle East over the course of the day as well. Moving us on down and into the rest of the news that we got from the U.S. side today, we were able to hear once again from CBS, citing sources knowledgeable on the matter, that the U.S. is indeed preparing to resume strikes in Iran, but as of this afternoon, they hadn't made a decision. Additionally, per the report, members of the intelligence community and the military have been canceling Memorial Day weekend plans as defense and intelligence officials update recall rosters to facilitate the movement of personnel out of the region. Such efforts were taken previously to limit the amount of U.S. personnel in harm's way of the Iranian fires that were being directed at U.S. forces forces at the opening of the conflict. The Iranians have also stated as well today that they will not be discussing nuclear topics, and they also do not believe that they'll be reaching any resulting details on anything pertaining to highly enriched uranium. We've also seen that the IRGC affiliated outlet Tasnim stated today that Iran's military is preparing for any potential foolish acts, as they said it, by the United States and will respond to any attack by escalating the war and striking new targets. So they are threatening war once more as usual. We've also seen that in the meantime in Iran, there are long lines of people waiting to get some fuel. Apparently, there's some fuel shortages going on in Iran, which is kind of shocking on top of everything. They don't have water, they don't have money, they don't have fuel. They don't really have a lot.
Oh, these hoes must be from Iraq, the way they back that gas up. Damn.
Man, I tell you, they'd be looking for any kind of gas. I heard they were smoking on that galaxy gas, trying to find some. Oh, man. I mean,
I'll tell you what, everybody's having a little shortage. It looks like Russia's having some shortages. Looks like Iran's having some shortages. What a sight here. You know, it's got to be hot as hell waiting out there on that roadway in that desert. That's got to be hot.
I heard you can cook eggs on them roads.
Man, I heard you can cook a lot of stuff out here on these roads, but I'm not sure if they wanna.
I heard that you could cook the Iranian army on this street.
I've heard they're stir frying out here on these streets, but they're not stir frying rocks. Let's just put it that way.
Oh man, I heard mashallah, they gonna be slamming the Iranian armies into the concrete out here. But moving on from that, we've also been able to see, moving us out of southeastern Iran, that within the capital, there were some other interesting statements today. They stated that the IRGC is now on the highest state of alert. That's something else. Looks like they might be getting ready for something, but you never know, folks. They might just be putting them on a high state of alert to test out their combat readiness and see how many air defense guns they can fire into the air and hit absolutely nothing with. That's what they did last time.
Also, by the way, in that last post back there, did you cover the part about them trying to strike beyond the region, by the way? It was in that post from Tasnim.
Oh, yes, I forgot. They're threatening to strike at Europe now as well as a retaliation for any future U.S. attacks. So as of Iran's last claims, today, that is, they were saying that if the U.S. strikes them, they're going to be conducting hits on new targets, not only within the Middle East, but inside of Europe as well, suggesting that they would be using their longer-range IRBMs, like the Karam Shahers or the Karam Shahar 4s, to be able to try and hit targets in Europe. By the way, folks, the farthest they can reach in Europe is southern Germany. So the furthest range targets that they could hit would be cities like Prague and Munich, but everything else in Western Europe beyond that arc is generally out of range. But beyond that, though, they're certainly trying to escalate this whole thing. Now they're trying to threaten to attack Europe, which, mind you all, would be a legitimate Article 5 invocation if they conducted a direct, legitimate armed attack deliberately on a European state. That would 9 times out of 10 be a native Article 5 invocation. Possibly. So a lot of people are talking on this at the moment right now and are wondering, would the Iranians be stupid enough to allow an excuse to invoke Article 5 if the U.S. started attacks on them again? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so Iran is back to it again. They said they'll use brand new weapons. They said they're going to strike well beyond the region of the Middle East if the U.S. resumes their attacks. So would Iran really be stupid enough to start attacking Europe, which has nothing to do with the fight, by the way, and is largely, for the most part, I would say, refused to let the U.S. even use the bases to attack Iran? Would Iran really be that stupid to start attacking people and drag other people in that literally pretty much want to stay out of it? And it looks like 39% said no, Iran would not be that stupid. 28% said yes, Iran will strike Europe next. And 25% said, Iran will try, but they'll fail to hit. And I think personally, we can't put anything beyond Iran because they don't use common sense. If they did, they wouldn't be in the position they're in right now. So I would say that Iran could try to do it, but I think they'll ultimately probably fail to hit anything because there is air defense inside of Europe, mainly because we're seeing the Russian threat. So they're kind of prepared for something to happen. Now, I will say it's not a foolproof defense. Like if Iran fires like a few, they could possibly get one through maybe, which would be bad. But I think that we can't can't put anything past them because Iran is getting more desperate. And if the fighting starts up way worse than it was before, they could try to, I guess, go for a Hail Mary maybe by attacking Europe. I'm not sure what the logic would be behind it because, like I said, Europe's generally trying to stay out of it. But, you know, you can't put logic to terrorists. They don't use logic. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that they probably would be stupid enough to do something like that. We thought that it would be absolutely stupid beyond belief for them to just start attacking random countries in the Middle East. Yet they did. Like, I remember at the beginning of I remember before the war started when they were threatening that. You and me, I think, were on air going, that would be absolutely stupid if they did that. Like, we don't know if they would, but it would really be a dumb thing to do. And then they ended up attacking literally everybody they could in the Middle East. So there is a possibility that they could follow through with this threat, considering that they followed through with that one. And they could attack Europe. And a lot of people are saying, well, the Europeans are weak, feeble. They wouldn't declare Article 5 over something like that. Well, I mean, if a missile lands in Munich and kills 30 German civilians, there's really no other choice but to try and invoke Article 5 for the German government at that point, because imagine how badly that would go in Germany for the people who are in charge in the Bundestag right now. They would watch 30 Germans get obliterated in a market in the middle of Munich, literally wiped off the face of the earth, the concrete smeared with their blood from an Iranian IRBM, and then they just choose not to do anything about it. I mean, that wouldn't go over well in Germany. Whoever would be in charge of the country at that point, who is Merz, will probably end up getting removed from his position or be forced to resign because they chose not to react. That wouldn't go over well. Whenever a country gets directly attacked and a decent amount of people end up getting killed as a result, if that happens, you have no other choice but to go to war because now it's a defensive war. And at that point, Germany would have a very easy way of getting everybody in NATO to agree to invoke Article 5 for their common defense because Iran just conducted an unsolicited attack on them that ended up killing a large amount of people. So I would say that if people don't end up dying and they end up shooting down any incoming missiles, like with the Aegis Ashores that we have in Europe, probably nothing will come out of it. If one of those missiles do make it through, however, and they hit something important and they end up killing some people in any NATO country, they are most likely going to invoke Article 5 over that. But given how the air defenses went in Turkey when Iran tried to attack the U.S. forces at the Incirlik Air Base, and we shot down the missiles and Turkey's reaction was fairly mild, I would assume that a lot of European states would also have a fairly mild reaction if something was fired over them and they shot it down and it didn't result in any casualties or fatalities. They probably wouldn't do anything in response but say, we strongly condemn what Iran just did. That was so mean of them to try and do that. Tisk, 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 and that'll be about it. But moving us on out of that, we have also been able to hear, outside of Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, that within Lebanon, the Israelis are getting busy. The Israelis have been conducting airstrikes across the entirety of the country today, throughout the whole of southern Lebanon, and also throughout the entirety of the areas of the Baalbek valleys and the valleys near to Mount Hermon, which are near to the area of the Syrian border, as this post stated right here, with 5 Israeli airstrikes landing incredibly close to the Syrian border and possible supply lines that Hezbollah has that now run into Syria. We can also see some more pictures here of the airstrikes that were conducted in the area of the Lebanon Valley as well in that picture. We also were able to see some proof of the damage that was caused in Tyre today as a result of these strikes and the rubble fields that were created from the bombings.
Looks like a bad hit.
Man, I've got to tell you, man, that these hits are getting worse and worse every day, man. Like, oh God, man, this shit ain't no joke, man. But anyways, moving us on out of that and on out of southern Lebanon, it is time for us to move on out of the Middle East, as that is all of the news that we have from there. And it's time for us to move back up into Europe and into the war in Ukraine, which we still have a lot to cover of. We were able to hear in Britain today, particularly in London, that NATO has held an underground war drill in the London Underground in preparation for a possible war with Russia. The exercises took place in the abandoned platform at Charing Cross Station in London, and military personnel simulated a potential Russian attack on the Baltic states. As part of the operation, NATO practiced deep strikes, electronic warfare, and counter-drone operations. So it is showing us that at the moment, Europe is trying to get as prepared as possible to be able to deal with the kind of attacks that will be coming their way, and it looks like the British are attempting to go with the classic using the London Underground as a refuge from possible attacks. They did this, by the way, in the Second World War to great success, keeping a lot of civilians in relative safety in the underground stations, and also operating some of their armed forces out of the London Underground as well.
Oi, Governor, it's time to go down the tube to go get some shelter, yeah? It's time to go down there and get a little protection from the incoming flying missiles, yeah? It's a little bit different than the time of Dunkirk. It's a little bit stranger.
Oi, Governor, we be at that Charing Cross the way we're about to burn those Russians to the stake, Governor. Like, man, we're about to burn the hell out of them. But beyond that, hopefully
All you have to do to get into the tube to protect your safety and protect your life from the Russian missiles is simply show your digital ID at the door.
If we hear you say anything mean like the Russians are bastards, we will classify it as hate speech and throw you out of the channel soon chance we get. Like you might get hit by a missile, but we ain't gonna have those hateful comments around here.
We won't have any Facebook comments or any commenters coming down in the tube and polluting the tube with their opinions. We won't have it. You'll go above ground.
If I see any TikToks made in the underground, I swear to God, we're going to have the bobbies come down and they're going to say, "You have committed great slander against His Majesty's government. You are going to His Majesty's prison at Sandefjord, and we'll throw you in the shittiest place you've ever seen. The walls are literally made of mold at this point. Horrendous place, real bad conditions, honestly." Indeed, I say, heavens be. But moving us on out of that, and on out of the UK, we also were able to hear today that the Polish have received a blessing. Would you look at it? By the way, Vladislav Kosiniak, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, and my apologies if I'm not, was able to show us a video today of something that just arrived. The Polish have gotten their first batch of F-35 Lightnings from the United States. Look at them. They're beautiful. Oh.
Beautiful. You gotta love it. They're gonna need them, too.
Oh, yeah, they're definitely gonna be... Man, imagine the Russians coming up against one of these. They have basically no defense against it.
Yeah, really, they don't. This is a scary sight for Russia. This is a lot of money flying in the air right here. If one of these go down, it could affect the entire GDP of Russia.
Honestly, you know what's crazy is that Poland's economy, I think these days, is about the same size as Russia's. From the estimates that we've been hearing lately, I think Russia's economy is like 1.2 to 1.3 trillion, and Poland's is about 1.1 trillion. So Poland technically has about the same spending power as Russia would in a war.
Kind of weird. It's like it kind of shows that authoritarianism doesn't really pay. It's kind of better to be a democracy. Like I think Poland's got it down pat.
Man, Poland got that Galaxy pack with them. The way they be, smoking on that democracy kush, or whatever the hell they say these days. These kids, these damn kids.
It's all that Polish sausage they're eating. That's what's made them strong all these years. That kielbasa.
Man, I've heard that the Polish have gotten so angry at the Russians lately, they've offered to give them a bit of their sausage.
Yeah, I heard they're gonna. Yeah.
I heard they're gonna grind them up, really give them some of that meat.
Yeah, they're gonna give them some sausage. That's all right.
Man, I heard they call that thing the kielbasa.
Man, they're gonna give them that sausage.
Man, and they ain't giving them no. Well, they giving them that kielbasa with the extra mayo. I tell you, because that's how it's served in Poland. Kielbasa with mayo, a classic. Man, but I gotta say, this clip is really something else. I just wanted to show y'all the beauty of it, because I love the F-35. There's been a lot of propaganda that the Russians put out that the F-35 is doo-doo, but the Russians say that because their Su-57 is dog shit, and they want to give it a fair run, at least in public opinion. The F-35 is an amazingly good aircraft, especially in the multi-role. And I just saw someone say that the F-22 would absolutely rinse the F-35. And yeah, but that's like saying an F-15 would rinse an F-16. The answer to that is duh. Obviously it would, but that's because the F-15 is a thoroughbred air superiority fighter, and the F-22 is as well. The F-35s and the F-16s are multi-role aircraft, and they're designed to be able to deal with air threats and ground threats, which is what most early iterations of the F-15 could never do, because they were purebred for air supremacy, or air-to-air fighting, or an air superiority fighter is really what they were designed to be. So I gotta say, a wonderful thing to see that the Polish got their first batch of F-35s, and I hope that they are another happy customer. Moving us on out of that, we did get to see the Ukraine is conducting a drone attack on Russia right now. Oh, That's quite a lot of drones. Also, by the way, this was the attack that hit Novorossiysk, just to let you all know. And we also saw that some of these drones were getting close to Moscow. The Russians put out their sus drone warning again.
Oh, man, I tell you, those drones are a little bit Reiki.
Man, also their wordage is very weird. Moscow region, security measures have been taken. Multiple fixations from the Kaluga region. It's like, what the hell do they mean fixations? Like baggies of coke or flying through the air or something? They're about to get their fixes? Like, what the hell
Sounds
does
like a
that mean?
diagnosis. Like, there's multiple fixations in the Kaluga region. It's like, oh, okay.
Man, that's Dmitry Peskov out there getting some of that snoot fool.
Man, I'll tell you.
Bruh, dude, in Russia, they call vodka the fixation. And they said, whip out that fixation. We're about to be getting gassed. But moving on from that, we also hear here in Moscow that the Russians have accused Ukraine of conducting a terrorist attack. According to the Russians, they're alleging that some university or college got attacked last night by the Ukrainians, and therefore it's a terrorist attack. You know, they're completely skirting over the fact that Russia blew up and killed 50 people in Kharkiv. They killed, a couple of dozen in many other cities, Dnipro, Zaporizhia, and so on. They also killed tens of thousands of civilians in Mariupol. According to the Russians, those aren't war crimes because Ukrainians aren't humans, they're animals, according to the Russians at this point. But apparently, according to Putin's allegations, six killed and 39 injured. That's just too much. That's just breaking the camel's back right there. The Russians can slaughter Ukrainian civilians in the hundreds of thousands, and no one should bat an eye. But God forbid anyone in Russia ever possibly gets killed, and we can't even confirm this because the Russians have given absolutely no proof of this claim at the moment. But God forbid a single Russian dies in these sorts of attacks, because then the gloves are off. It's just ridiculous. The Russians are, of course, one-sided with this whole sort of thing. But we also are able to hear that at the same time, Russia's having to sell a lot of geld. A lot of gelders, This is Russia's gold holdings in millions of fine troy ounces, as opposed to shitty troy ounces, which apparently there are some, because fine indicates that there are unfine troy ounces, and I don't really know what that would be. I guess a lower purity or whatnot. But they are starting to sell these things off by the bushel. They've gone from 74.8 million fine troy ounces to 73.8 shitty troy ounces. So it does look like they're running into some pretty bad financial woes, and they're trying to use the gold to be able to sell, to find some money somehow to be able to prop up the country by giving out bailouts and whatnot by the money that they're able to receive by selling off the gold. By the way, folks, gold is one of the few things that is not sanctioned for anybody. North Korea can buy and sell gold with anybody in the world. There's really no sanctions on it. Russia can also do that as well, and Iran can do that as well. And a lot of people always say, and I think this is so funny. Everybody's like, oh, America, they've got that fiat money. It's got that fiat 500 on it. They don't back their money with gold. Countries like Russia, Iran, and North Korea are really trying to delete the petrodollar by buying gold. It's like they don't realize this, but the whole reason they buy and sell gold is because they can't get US dollars directly. So they get the gold to sell it to get US dollars to then try and buy stuff with. So the whole point of any of them having gold is to literally just use it to get foreign currency whenever they need it, because they have restrictions on being able to trade in US dollars. Kind of a little bit of a sad reality when you think about it. But moving us on out of that, we also were able to hear that apparently this happened in Moscow.
Oh, a little lightning strike. That's another element. Didn't this just happen the other day? This is happening pretty often these days.
Yeah, this happened just the other day, and we saw another violent lightning storm, a thunderstorm, happen in Moscow again. This, by the way, in American terms is nothing. This is like a normal thunderstorm in Alabama. But for Moscow, this is actually the worst thunderstorms they have seen in a long time. And this is just in a couple of days, the second one that we've seen. Good God, that's loud as hell.
Whoa,
Oh my
what the
God.
hell was that?
Good
My ears.
morning. Good morning.
My ears.
Oh my God, dude. I think I'm deaf. I hear my ears ringing right now. That was so damn loud. It just made me jump straight awake. I was already awake, by the way, folks. I'm awake now, though. I mean, that was loud as hell. Damn. But you see the thunderstorm there as well. There's also some hail in it. Putin must be nearby. We also got to see some more of the lightning strikes as well in these pictures here, which are clearly giving us an indication at this point that Moscow is starting to deal with some pretty turbulent storms.
I would say, man, they're going through a drone storm, a natural storm. I mean, I will say, what are the odds that they start having these horrid thunderstorms with hail, lightning, and like absolute like hell is like burning over inside of Moscow? Even the environment is fighting against them at this point. I mean, what else could they have come against them?
Man, Putin's up there in the Kremlin, man, going, I heard that I told the president when I was in English that I said, next time in Moscow. Well, it looks like there will never be a next time. And then, like, the lightning striking out the window behind him. He looks like a demon up there.
We would like to come out and say that Mother Nature is a beach, but Russia is not a beach. It's Mother Nature. Screw Mother Nature, bled.
Man, watch and hear in a little bit. They're going to say, we have to announce the unfortunate death of a Russian general from his 30th story apartment because, crazy enough, folks, believe it or not, freak accident. The lightning bolt went through the window while he was standing right at it, zapped him, blew away the glass, and he fell from the 30th floor down to the ground. It's crazy, I know, right?
Oh, no. What they say, hopefully he had good insurance. But, he gets fried like a charcoal, like a briquette. He fell like a briquette. The poor bastard.
They said that they had the barbecue on his body. It was a tragedy. Like, man, it was a real sad thing. They cooked ribs on top of him. But also, man, like, it's even crazier, man, because if that happened, the Russians would play that up to hell, man, because they'd be trying to cover up the FSB execution that happened in the middle of the storm. Man, Peskov would be out there blitzed, like, red-faced, eyes blinking separately while he's trying to blink. He'd be going, these things, they happen from time to time. I mean, bro, he'd be blitzed like that last time we saw him on May 9th, I tell you. But moving us on out of that, we also were able to see that the Ukrainians had more information to report at this moment on the crisis well, not really the crisis, but more so the threat of a possible invasion from the Belarusian territories. We were able to hear that according to Zelenskyy today, now the Belarusians could also conduct attack on the Volyn, Zhytomyr, and Rivne regions. To show you all these regions and where they are, this is the Zhytomyr Oblast, this is the Rivne Oblast, and the Volyn Oblast, I believe that's the one with Lutsk in it. So this is the farthest west one. So they're saying that everything over here to the west could also be threatened with an invasion. But I do have to tell y'all that we've heard this one several times over the years. And usually whenever the Ukrainians catch this sort of a thing and they start threatening that they'll obliterate the Belarusians if they try and pull a stunt like that, they usually back off, and we've never seen them try an invasion in the west because logistically that would be damn near impossible to support for the Russians militarily at this point, or the Belarusians even on their own home soil. We also were able to hear that according to Ukrainian intelligence, and this is probably the best news that we've got, an offensive from Belarus is possible no earlier than autumn. So at this moment, they're expecting that the offensive would happen at some point in the autumn at the earliest, which means that it's either going to be happening in the frigid cold of the winter, or it's going to be happening in the Rasputitsa season of the fall, where the ground is completely impassable to any sort of a vehicle because they'll sink right into the mud. So it looks like, from what the Ukrainians are saying right now, while they could conduct an attack from Belarusian territory, it's not going to be happening anytime in the summer, which is the perfect time for them to try and conduct an offensive like that to get some ground before the Rasputitsa sets in. They would be conducting the offensive in the middle of the Rasputitsa or in the winter weather, which both of those conditions are not ideal for any sort of an offensive. At best, their best case scenario is starting it at the very late spring, which would be right now, because the ground is finally solidifying from the first Rasputitsa in the spring, and that would be giving them the longest window of fair weather to work with to be able to conduct an offensive before the next Rasputitsa sets in the fall. But apparently, according to Ukrainian intelligence, the best the Russians could pull off, or the Belarusians could pull off, is the autumn, which is a very unideal sort of a season to conduct an offensive in. And also on top of that, even if it succeeds, you're immediately going into the winter, which slows down combat operations to a crawl for the larger part. We also were able to hear that according to some Ukrainian officials, including the foreign minister Andrei Sibia, he stated that the U.S. brokered talks with Russia are gradually reaching the point of exhaustion, which everybody obviously knew because the Russians cannot be negotiated with. Moving us on out of that, we've also been able to see in the location unknowns today something else. The return of the war donkey, Bliet. Look at him. Majestic.
Oh, man, a war donkey. Oh, look at that. Bro, that donkey was just dragging that dude around like he was just a rag doll. Oh, I was trying to go over here to see this other donkey.
Man, they are friends, I suppose. Or more than friends, perhaps. Like,
Oh, damn. Oh, my goodness. I thought this only happened amongst the Russian soldiers.
I tell you, man, like, I've never seen, like, I've never seen, I've never seen something like that in my life, I tell you, folks. But, yeah, it looks like the donkeys are getting more action than the Russian army is at this point. Oh, man, that's tough right there, real tough. Oh, man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. I went to the front lines. They sat there and told me that I get plenty of women. I sat there and watched the donkey get more than I got. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Oh, man, I get no respect around here. But moving us on from that, we also were able to see that the Russian casualty report came out for the day. And sadly, there were no Bobcats, but we did get...
Oh, damn. They didn't get a single one. Zero. That's what they say. Zero.
It's a tragedy, really. I mean, it's so sad. We had so many days, folks, where there was at least one Bobcat getting destroyed, but it just seems like the streak was broken today. What can I say, folks? It's an unfortunate thing. But moving us on from that, Miss DC, Keeper of the Records, did state that the actual is one tank lost. A total of 1,944 is correct, and missing is 4 ground robotic complexes which were lost, which sadly we haven't seen that added to the Kyiv Independence infographic yet. But over the course of the past 24 hours, 880 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed, along with 3 APCs, 135 supply trucks, 1 main battle tank, 57 artillery pieces, 1,872 drones, 1 MLRS, and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. All in all, it was a pretty decent day for losses. And once we enter the front, y'all will see why. Moving us on down into the Lehman area, we did get to see some Ukrainian forces in the 63rd Mechanized Brigade conducting some clearing operations. Oh, Chad music. Oh, let's mute that.
Oh, bro, they're playing that American rap music in the background. They can't do that. That's not permissible.
Oh my god, this guy had a PKM and just was spraying down a room to clear it. Look at that. Dude, that is crazy.
Man, he just like tore down all the walls, the concretes and everything. That poor house will need a renovation now.
We can also see the Ukrainians in ghillie suits hopping out of their BTR-4 and beginning building clearing operations around the town of Lehman as the Ukrainians are starting to slowly push the Russians back in this area. The Battle of the Severonsky Forest has been going on since the beginning of the war, funnily enough, literally since September of 2022, and about 3.5 years later, the Russians are still fighting over this little stretch of ground leading to Lehman and into the Severonsky Forest. And the Ukrainians are in the process of pushing them back for about the 3rd time, I believe.
I love how the Ukrainians, when they clear a house, they just like put the gun around the corner, spray, and then they walk on through. It's like putting like pest control, pesticides in there, something like that. Make sure it's clear, and then they just walk on through.
Yeah, man, they said, excuse me, I have to fog the room. And then they just start laying down like a machine gun in there. It's something else. Really, it's pretty impressive to watch. Because while the Ukrainians don't conduct a lot of infantry-on-infantry battles these days to try and cut down on casualties, when they do, they are more than well experienced at this point. They'd probably be able to give some of the best forces in the United States a run for their money with the amount of experience that they have on the front. We also were able to see that near to the Bakhmut area, a Ukrainian drone attacked a Russian supply vehicle from a Russian POV on his bike. Let's watch. Oh, what's that? I hear something. Oh.
Oh, that was so quick you couldn't even process it mentally. That came in so quick.
Look at this. Damn. Dude, that thing was going like 200 miles an hour.
Yeah, with one moving that fast, I don't even think you have a chance to get out of the way of that thing. Like, you can't even react to that.
Man, I don't think you can. Like, it's like, dang. This guy's like, wow.
Is that the new fast racing drone that Ukraine has? You know, the new fast ones that go like ultra quick?
Maybe. Yeah, it is actually. See, it's basically flying kind of like a plane almost.
Yeah, that's the type that they use to physically intercept some of those larger drones. Like Shaheds, they'll use these to physically intercept them. But yeah, it looks like they've added a warhead to them and they're starting to use them to hit.
Man, honestly, that's insane, the speed. I mean, that's like a little hellfire, basically.
Yeah, I would say so. That's remarkable. Also, apparently, it can carry a hell of a payload. I mean, look at that explosion.
Yeah, I mean, look at the aftermath once this guy pulls up to it. Yeah. Bro, there's little pieces floating around and everything.
Man, did you hear this guy when he first got hit? He went, he was in pure shock.
Bro, he lost the ability to speak. He went, like, it's like, damn, dude, that's rough. You see him looking around. Oh, there's a vehicle up there. It appears to have careened off the road and into that tree line over there, maybe running into a tree. It's hard to tell from this distance.
This guy's in no hurry to go check on his comrades.
Man, he said, damn, they might be dead. And then just slowly walks that way. He's like, man, no reason to check. I mean, you know, like, whatever, I guess. But moving us on from that clip, which is pretty nuts to see, we also got to see in Konstantinivka that the Ukrainian armed forces were continuing to shoot down Russian ambush drones. Check these guys out. We see one here with a Bren 2, a CZ Bren 2. He's just popping at that little Russian drone up there in the net. We also see this Ukrainian APC pass by with an artillery piece. We can also see this guy pointing out an ambush drone and shooting it in the street. And also another ambush drone. Ambush drones have become a very common tactic on both sides. The tactic requires for them to fly the drone out, land it in a spot, and then wait for a vehicle to pass by. Once a vehicle passes by, the drone takes off and then chases down the vehicle and hits it from the rear. It's been a very common tactic over the past year from especially the Russians, but the Ukrainians have started to catch on and are usually able to shoot them and destroy them before the vehicle is hit or destroyed. We also were able to see within the Pokrovsk area as well, the 108th Mechanized Brigade of the Da Vinci unit, rest in peace to Da Vinci, I believe he died in mid-2023, but we were able to see here that they were continuing to drop bomblets on Russian positions on the northern flank of the Pokrovsk battlefield. You see them dropping the bomblets, and in a minute they're about to show the compilation of all of them blowing up. And here's the compilation of them blowing up. Quite a lot of explosives in those bombs.
I would say so. They're literally digging a hole in the ground here, like getting rid of this. Yeah, I did a number on this one right here. Look at that.
Opa. Boy. I don't think these are usable bunkers anymore. I think this is what's called an open-air trench. Maybe even a patio.
Yeah, it's a junk pile now.
Man. A landfill, like the Russians are used to.
They love to feel the land, bled.
Man, you know, they always say that the Russians live off the land. Now they say that the Russians live under the land.
It's a new way of life. It's called going underground for safety.
For personal safety. We like to emulate the actions of our great president, Vladimir Putin. We like to go underground and hide there for the entirety of the war until someone tries to blow us up.
It's a really remarkable thing, bled. It's a remarkable thing. Now pass the vodka.
In the meantime, the Ukrainians are getting their supplies provided to them via Ukraine Eats, which is a shoot-off of other companies that are similar to that in name. The little UGVs are basically the only vehicles these days that conduct resupplies to Ukrainian units, and we can actually see that this one here is, before we get to the meme, like before we get to that meme, but you can actually see that the Russians had an ambush FPV sitting right here behind this burnt-out APC that's now about to try and destroy the UGV. So what the UGV is about to do is something impressive, something straight out of Fast and Furious. Watch, it stops, and then they whip that sick Tokyo
Vin
Drift.
Diesel.
Oh, they broke its
my
ankles.
goodness.
Oh my god.
Damn. Hey, they got the little eyeballs looking at it too.
Look at this. Oh! Oh my god. That is unbelievable. And the UGV goes back on its way.
These are a lot tougher than the civilian mod. Whoa, come on, bro. They didn't have to do that. They didn't have to put Vin Diesel in the Ukrainian outfit and stuff. Come on, that's cheesy.
I'm not gonna lie though, man. I mean, that is pretty hilarious, bro. They literally broke that thing's ankle. Bro, I can't believe you would think that the drone would be able to like psych out the UGV and eventually hit it. Crazy enough though, the Ukrainians with a ground drone outmaneuvered an ambush FPV, which had every advantage that it could have in every way over this thing, and they still ended up juking it. That's actually crazy. But moving us on out of the Pokrovsk front, and moving us on down to the area of Uruzhane, or specifically what's now being called the Novorossiysk front and the Melitopol front, we were able to see that the 422nd Regiment of the Luftwaffe was also hunting down Russian logistics behind the lines. They got that Geschnick Lightman kind of drip going on here. But anyways, we can see them targeting this Russian supply truck here. 18-wheeler. Or as they call it, a semi. A Buhanka. They use the AI zoom and enhance here to really show you what's underneath. Was that a Kubelwagen? Dude, that's a freaking Kubelwagen, bro.
Oh my God, man. It really... It really is. It was obscured by this like cheap camo netting up here. That is actually one of those. That's unbelievable. I wonder where they got their hands on that.
Bro, I honestly, man, I think it was a UAZ 469 because these are actually AI kind of like zoom and enhance things that they're doing right here. And I think that the AI mistook the UAZ 469 for a Kubel wagon. I mean, they do look kind of similar though.
That's a hell of a switch in with that. Damn.
Bro, the AI thought it was 1943 again, bro. They're fighting the Battle of Kursk. Oh my god. It's literally a Kubel wagon.
Oh man. It's all the unit putting out said Luftwaffe, so they brought in a little old artifact.
Bro, oh my god. Also, let me pull up a Kubel wagon for y'all really quickly to show you, and then let me pull up a UAZ 469 so that way I could show y'all what I think it was probably looking at. There's also something else it could have been, but this is what the AI apparently mistook the vehicle to be, which is this thing. Oh, hold up, I got the wrong one. The Kubel wagon right here. But what it probably was a UAZ 469. Or it could have been, and let me go get this one. This one's the one that memes. The Gas 69. Nice. He said it. But it could have been this because this looks a lot like that. So the AI mistook one of these to be a Kubel wagon. The German, I'm sorry, not the Germans. The Russians are definitely not using Kubel wagons. They're antiques, and there's hardly any of them left. There weren't a lot of them made in the first place. But anyways, moving us on out of that hilarious AI misinterpretation, we also got to see that apparently a Buhanka, a UAZ 469 Buhanka, is now like a Ford Sprinter van as well. Like, this AI is kind of messing up all over the place. We also see this civilian car. Looks like kind of like a Vauxhall. I also see this UAZ 469 here as well, also getting hit. This one I got right, actually. Oh, bro, man, they're getting like, bro, they're like, bro, they put a little man in there.
Man, I tell you, this minivan.
Man, mini man in the minivan. Bleed. But we also see them hitting the D30. And now they're going for some comms towers in the area. I also see them dropping some bomblets, like a bomber, on the Russian positions. Oh, look, wow, they actually lined that up right on the nail. I can tell you, folks, they are laying down some damage on these Russian forces. It's something else, really, when you watch it. The Luftwaffe is quite effective, you know? I feel like the Russians are quite familiar with fighting the Luftwaffe. What was it, like 80 years ago? I don't think they were using drones, though. They were using these things called Stokers. And they had these sirens on them that would sound. But that was a whole other time. I'm sure that these people aren't associated with that. But we can see them here continuing to obliterate Russian positions. All of these, by the way, are around the area of the Melitopol and Novorossiysk front. Because from what we know, the Luftwaffe drone unit kind of straddles the line between those two fronts. So these strikes are coming from that broader area of the periphery of both flanks on that front. But moving us on out of these clips, moving us on out of these clips because the rest of them are just striking Russian static positions. We also got to see that near to the area of the Melitopol front, precision strikes were conducted by the 226 TDS brigades drones on the Russians within this area. See, they have the little Cossack.
The TDS?
Yes,
the TDS brigade?
They hate me for no reason. They hate me. I don't know why. But we did get to see them dropping some bomblets down there. Really teaching the haters. You know, if they were flying over the Russians and dropping poop on them, it'd be like that one meme that was put out on the Truth Social. Crickets. But we can see them continuing to target and hit the Russian forces. Yeah, just like that. It was just like that. But it wasn't really there. It was just in my mind. But we also got to see them striking this ambush drone that the Russians had sitting out in the open. Boom! And it's gone. The explosive. It is a loss. And Elka said, well, we get a Wormbuster clip. I haven't seen a Wormbuster clip in a hot minute, actually. I wish I had some, but sadly we just don't. And also Magyar has completely dropped the whole car antenna thing. So we don't even have that to really show anymore, sadly. That's how much time has passed since the beginning of this war, is that we went from that being a commonality and really groundbreaking when Madior's birds first came into being, to now Madior doesn't even do the videos anymore, and it's basically just given that most of the war is drone-based. And look at that crappy Russian drone. That's a fiber optic, by the way, if y'all were wondering. But they're going to blow it up, so it won't really matter all too much. And about the being... Dang, dude, that thing turned into confetti. Like, dang.
They're giving it to him. Look at them.
Man, I tell you, they're giving them the lefts and the rights. The Ukrainians, they don't take political sides. They believe in equal lefts and rights. We also were able to see the Russian air defenses being destroyed in this area as well. Now, I have to tell y'all, folks, this is from a broader area. I had to put it near the Zaporizhia front, but this is from Crimea and Zaporizhia. So here is the clip with that in mind. We see them making their way out around the Russian air defenses. Oh, it looks like they found a couple. Found a lot, actually. Damn. Oh, look, there goes an air defense missile. And another one. They seem to be missing. Oh, that one just got blown up. There goes a radar. That looks to be... That's a Tunguska. That's a Tor. And also... Oh, that one's about to get slammed dead on. Another Tor. Another Tor. So that's 3 Tors. Radar for an S-400, another Tor, radar for a Buke M3 launcher, another Tor, another S-400 radar, another Buke TELAR, and another radar, and another 2 Tors. Damn, I don't think the Russians have any Tors left after today. This is every single Tor in existence getting nuked in one go. Damn. I gotta say, the Russian air defenses are having a tough break down there in Zaporizhia and Crimea. Tough times, but
burning out.
Man, burning out, drinking liquor, acting crazy and silly. I don't even care no more. But moving aside from that, it is time for us to get on up to Kyiv and cover the speech from the President of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, here on day 1550 of the news from around the world. And Zelenskyy out there in that park today, enjoying nature, which is very important. I tried to enjoy nature today, folks, and I ran into 3 snakes in less than a half mile. But without further ado, here's the speech. Peach!
Здоров'я, шановні українці і українки. Щойно говорили з нашими європейськими друзями. Британія, Франція, Німеччина, формат Є3. На кінець тижня може бути оновлення по готовності американців. І, звісно, багато залежить від розвитку ситуації з Іраном. Америка сфокусована на цьому. Все робимо, щоб активізувати нашу дипломатію, наблизити закінчення війни. Це перший наш пріоритет, очевидний. Україна завжди старається, щоб Європа була в перемовинах, щоб європейський голос точно був врахований. Питання, як саме ми разом приведемо ситуацію до миру, який буде надійним, який буде достойним. Ми домовились про зустріч на рівні наших НСА. Я поінформував Еммануеля, Кіра і Фрідріха про ситуацію в Україні, в нашому захисті. Я вдячний за високу оцінку наших позицій та здобутків українських воїнів. Дійсно, українські позиції сильніші зараз, ніж попередні роки. Від початку року 590 кілометрів нашої території звільнено і під контролем. Тенденція точно не в інтересах окупанта. Ми продовжуємо нарощувати показники знищення російського особового складу. І це разом із санкціями всіх форм примушує Росію до вибору дипломатії. Я дав детальну інформацію, яка є у нашої розвідки про плани росіян. Військові плани та політичні плани. Треба зараз все зробити, щоб активізувати дипломатію. Я очікую відповіді і від американської сторони по можливих форматах та графіку зустрічі. Була доповідь також сьогодні головнокомандувача Збройних сил Олександра Сирського. Наші далекобійні санкції. Ми продовжуємо досягати визначених цілей в Росії. Це передусім російська нафтопереробка. Їхні нафтові експортні можливості на цю добу було застосування по НПЗ в Ярославлі, 700 кілометрів від нашого кордону. Ми продовжуємо наші далекобійні операції. Важливо, що фронтові позиції теж сильні. Зокрема, є хороші результати на ключових напрямках. Я вдячний всім нашим ДШВ, нашим штурмовикам, вдячний усім підрозділам, які ефективно зупиняють російські штурми. І також дякую всім, хто підтримує нашу армію та сили безпеки. І сьогодні я тут на нашій прекрасній Рівненщині. Хочу подякувати всім нашим громадам трьох областей: Рівненська область, Житомирська, Волинська область. Ми говорили сьогодні з керівниками громад, в тому числі про захист цього північного напрямку. І враховуючи загрози, які є. Вчора були громади Чернігівської та Київської областей, сьогодні ще ця частина нашої держави. Жоден напрямок не залишимо без уваги. Було немало соціальних питань. Питань було багато освітніх. І про шкільний транспорт, і про дороги, щоб до шкіл доїжджати, і про будівництво нових шкіл. Урядовці все це чули, були онлайн. Я розраховую, що реагувати будуть предметно і будуть швидко. Розраховую на конкретні рішення. Дякую всім, хто працює заради нашої держави, всім, хто захищає Україну, свою громаду, як самого себе. Важливий день. Дякую. Дякую, Рівненщина. І, дорога Рівненщина, сьогодні ж тут я був у наших воїнів, відзначив нагородами наших хлопців, поранені воїни, які відновлюються саме тут. Один з них з Маріуполя, Максим, дав мені ось такий шеврон, ось цей шеврон. І з чітким бажанням, щоб Україна в Маріуполь повернулась, щоб повернулась на всю свою землю. І дуже, дуже хочемо, щоб так воно і було. Дякую. Дякую всім нашим воїнам, нашим захисникам. Слава Україні!
Heroes Slava.
And Blood be whipping out that merch at the end of that speech, bro. He said, also, by the way, whipped out the Mariupol patch. He's like, we wanted to be Ukraine again. Honestly, that was pretty
Man,
cool.
shameless plug at the very end. I remember those.
Oh, man, you can find this at the Zelenskyy store on zelensky.ua.com. It's a wonderful thing. You can get a mini Mariupol patch, and we'll make sure to burn the Russians patch while we're at it, like Cabbage Patch Kids. But nevertheless, that's the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 1,550 of the news from around the world. And with that in mind, everybody, we're about to be moving on to the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. As far as news is coming out, don't be expecting much. It's all questions from here on for the most part. And this is where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks, what a blast and a pleasure it is to get to this segment. Because after all of this time that y'all spent 2 hours and 28 minutes of listening to the news, y'all are now able to sit back and relax with us as we get to chit-chat with all of y'all, and y'all get to chit-chat with us about anything and everything that, you know, that we all want to bring up, except for religion, politics, climate change, and whether the A-10 is relevant in modern warfare or not, or whatever the hell that Blockbuster 35 guy threw in, because that got deleted so fast I literally couldn't read it. And sadly, they don't let me reread whatever it was that was thrown in. I'm, like, honestly curious about that one, because I actually didn't get to see it. But beyond that, though, it is time for us to get on into all of them questions. And I know, folks, we're going to have an absolute blast. And so, please, Matthew, take it away.
All right, so let's jump right into our super chat questions and get some live chats and the Morse code decoders of the night. But jumping right into our first super chat, this one goes to SFPG, and thank you very much for that $50 support, by the way, and we do appreciate that very, very much. And they said, great job, boys, is like always, and thank you, by the way. They said, always look forward to your insight, and take one for the chat, LSA, and shout out to that thick worm.
Hey, and a shout out to that big booty worm. Can't have a show without that big booty worm. And I gotta say a big thanks to you for enjoying the show, and I hope that it was a good one, like always. We always try and get deep into analysis, and sadly, the war in Iran, we can't really get into a lot of a deep analysis, rather than what we say should be done, because it's hard to even decipher what we're going to be doing tomorrow in that situation. But I hope that tonight, since we've been able to focus on the war in Ukraine, which works on a much more linear track and therefore a lot more easy to predict and calculate where things are going to be heading, I hope that we're able to get into some really good in-depth analysis tonight on what has happened and what's going to be happening as a result. It's thanks to folks like you and your incredible support that we're able to make shows of all of our types every single day possible, whether they be short war videos, live streams, whether they be prioritizing the Middle East, Ukraine, Thailand and Cambodia, East Asia, or even the Americas. You help us to make those shows possible, and you help through your support to make it a reality for everybody here who watches this show every single day to have one to come to. Nobody has to support this stream, and there is no mandate for people who consider themselves to be a part of the LSA to support the Enforcer show. Nevertheless, folks like you who go out of your way to support the channel through super chats and Patreon memberships help us to be able to make this thing possible each and every single day. If it wasn't for amazing folks like you who went out of your way to support this channel would have never been possible in its early days 4 years ago, and it still wouldn't be possible today. And so humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well, and with that, we will be taking one from the chat in your honor. So Matthew, what do we got?
So this one from the chat goes to Hope Restored, who said, would the U.S. still conduct strikes on Iran even if the Secretary of State is in India?
Oh, that's a good question. They could, because they don't have to fly necessarily over Iran or through Central Asia. They could fly to U.S. base, like say at Okinawa, or they could fly all the way to Guam and then take a pit stop in Guam and then fly back to the States. So if they wanted to, they could definitely do that. There's really no question about that at all. So I would say, yes, they probably could, because also on top of that, Iran would not want to get the ire of India. I mean, imagine all of the bot farms that would be on top of them if they did that. That would be unreal. And also imagine how many YouTube channels out there that are like based in India would be saying that India completely destroyed Iran every day, 90 times over, as long as the war went on. That's heat that nobody can take. I mean, India is unreal in that ability. So I would say, generally, I think that they're not going to be doing anything while the Secretary of State... Well, the U.S. might attack Iran while the Secretary of State is in India, but as far as Iran doing anything to him while he's in India, highly unlikely. And on top of that, India is a nuclear-armed power, so Iran lobbing any sort of weaponry towards India always could, lean towards that kind of an idea. Generally, most people don't want to mess with a nuclear-armed country, and India is one of them. So I hope that does address that live chat the best I can, and a humongous thanks to you so much once again, SFPG, for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have here, real quick, I'm going to actually jump down in the spreadsheet real quick to grab one right here that just came in from Crispy, who put in a 10. And Crispy wanted me to shout something out while you were still here for the night. And thank you very much, Crispy, for that $10 support, by the way. He said, can you give a good positive shout out to my son Gabriel and my daughter Gwen before they have to go to bed?
And of course we can, of course. A huge shout out to your son Gabriel and your daughter Gwen. I hope they've been enjoying the show tonight. I actually don't know if they watch frequently. I'm sure you know, Crispy. But I have to say a huge shout out to Gabriel and Gwen for watching, and I hope that y'all been enjoying the show as well tonight. Y'all are the future of our great republic. Every single child growing up right now in this country is the future of our nation. And I hope that if y'all have been watching the show and enjoying it, that y'all find a great deal of worth in our nation, and the fact of continuing to try and aspire to be the best that we can be, to be able to improve our nation and hopefully our lot as a people in the future as we continue to watch the United States struggle across the globe to be able to achieve what's in our national interests. And I also got to say that it's amazing to know that folks as young as y'all are watching, because there aren't a lot of people demographically on this channel that are in an age bracket similar to Matthew and me, and much less y'all. I would assume that y'all are definitely a good bit younger than us, because Matthew and me are 25 and 20. Actually, Matthew's about to be 26 and I'm 24. So I bet y'all are a lot younger than us, and it's great to know that kids like y'all are interested in stuff like this, because regardless of what your fellow students say, because I know that they're probably going to be saying stuff like, oh, that's just nerdy, because they used to tell me that all the time. Don't worry about that. Y'all are definitely the future of the country, and it's an amazing to know that y'all are interested in this sort of stuff and getting into it very early on, because I'm sure that y'all have a very aspiring future as a well-informed and knowledgeable citizen on affairs that pertain to our country. So a huge shout out to Gabriel and Gwen once again, and a big shout out to Crispy as well for being an amazing father of uprising, upstart citizens of this republic and of the Lee Spring Army. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a $50 support from Game Theory, and thank you very much, Game Theory, for the 50. They said today the U.S. had to send out a don't insider trade note after those last-minute oil trades, and it sounds like some people might have done their homework, maybe.
Well, did they do that?
I heard something. I don't know about that exactly, but I heard something about they told people not to do the whole like prediction market thing. I heard that they told them to get off of that, which is common sense, by the way. Nobody should be on that. That's in the government. But also, I don't know about that one right there in the super chat. I'm not totally sure about that one, but I would assume so.
That's interesting. I've been hearing some little things here and there coming out of what's happening in Washington. I'll have to tell you, folks, I don't watch it a whole lot because it's a cesspit, really. Like it's a tough thing to have to listen to and try and pay attention to up there. But something that I did hear recently, folks, is that this is something that I just find very interesting. They're working on this big arch over across the water, across the Potomac River, right here at this roundabout. And I've actually heard that they've paused that. Now, generally, I'm actually a bit of a fan of national monuments. I think that, building impressive things is neat, but I've been hearing that this one has a very political kind of a attachment to it, or at least they're working on that, and I'm not really a big fan of that. I always think, folks, that as far as monuments go, monuments should always be built with the concept of the monument or memorial being built posthumously for whatever it's representing. A monument should never be built for anyone that's living, or a memorial for anyone that's living. It should always be decades later after that person or that event has long passed. And I think that's something that's kind of missed in the modern day with the monument and memorial building. Because I'd have to say, folks, it is very vain to have, especially by commission of the government, a statue or a memorial kind of built to reflect your own greatness or image while you're in office. Because the Lincoln Memorial was built in the 1920s, 60 years after Lincoln had been assassinated at the Ford's Theater. The Washington Monument started construction in the 1840s, 50 years after Washington died. The Jefferson Memorial was built in 1942. That's almost 150 years after Jefferson died. And I'm always of the belief that if you're a living, breathing person, you shouldn't have any monuments or memorials named after you. And there's been some exceptions to that. In some cases, even with warships, for example, some warships have actually been named after presidents after they're no longer presidents, but they're still alive. I don't really like that kind of stuff. You should only be honored or recognized after your death. That's my personal belief with monuments, memorials, and whatnot. But an interesting thing going on around Washington right now with that whole shebang and skedaddle and whatnot, if you want to call it that. But a big thanks to you for the support, and help this channel to keep it running, and I hope that does address that the best I can, although we really can't get into that all too much. But with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have here a 50 from Star, and thank you very much, Star, for that $50 support as well.
Hey!
And he said, "It's me, and we're doing this as neutrally as possible, sir." I said, sir, back for a rare appearance, they say, on the Infarter channel. That's what they call it, the Infarter. It's a channel that nobody respects. They said, sir, take it down, sir. It's a shitty channel. They say, shitty, brand new word. I totally lost my whole impersonation saying that. I cracked myself up. I'm losing it. I'm here to tell you that I love Xi. He's a great guy. That Xi Jinping, they call him Jinping because he's Xi. He's such a beautiful man. Beautiful. You can almost kiss him. But, it's each his own. A powerful man. So sweet. So amazing. I also like a little bit of drool, too. He said something about his son, though. I don't know what he said about his son. I don't know about his son. That's the crazy part. I don't know about that. He said, I don't like weddings. I don't like it. I'm going to invade Cuba because I don't want to go to the wedding. I think this is like the second or third wife. It's a lot. It's going through a lot. It's a tricky thing, wives. It's a tricky thing.
I gotta say, it's a wonderful and amazing thing that folks like you support this channel. You're a star, not in the ratings, but you're a star in our heart. That's great. I have to talk about that Condoleezza Rice, wonderful person, great person, but I gotta say that those little shits on the Infighter channel are really something else. They love to talk about me every day. It's really sad. Their ratings are plummeting. Their stocks are dwindling. A lot of people have been saying that they need to be taken off the air, and honestly, they don't have a lot of air left in their lungs. They talk so quietly. Just listen to them yap. They sit there and they go, and they don't say anything of substance. Really lame, honestly, but I love Xi. Xi is a great guy. We all love dictators. They're wonderful people. It's wonderful how they sit there and they crush their citizens and they run their country with an iron fist. Really admirable, honestly. It's something that we ought to try and emulate, but that's just what some people have been saying. That's not what I think personally. But outside of that, though, I do have to say that I got to be honest with you. These weddings, they're getting old. You know, we believe in strong values, strong traditional values until it comes with sticking with your wife. That's something that you ought to be jumping off the ship. Men first, not women and children first. That's men first. Get those divorce papers drafted up and cook them up nice, because we got to try and speed run as many marriages as we can. It's a wonderful thing. We believe in marriage so much we marry at least 5 times in our life. It's something else. But beyond that, though, I do have to thank you greatly for the support and having this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for amazing, great people like you, we wouldn't be able to talk about all of the incredible things that we've been doing here in America. Like, for example, we gave away oil and natural gas rights just today in the northern part of the Grand Canyon. It's a wonderful thing, really, when you think about it. Who needs a Grand Canyon, and why is it grand if we're not getting oil out of it? It's something else. But anyways, a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. It's a great, wonderful thing, folks like you. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 30 from Dan Brooks, and thank you, Dan, as well, for that $30 support. He said, payday today. Long live the LSA, and take one from the chat.
And thank you for the support, and thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. Long live the Lee Spring Army, and we will make sure to get a live chat in your honor. And so what do we got for the live chat, man, in honor of Dan Brooks?
And the live chat goes to Scout, who said, when do you guys think Ukraine will be able to retake Crimea? And also, love to stream tonight.
And I thank you so much for the support, and a great question there. And I'd have to say, I don't know if it's going to be soon. I honestly, like, even with the conditions, supply side in Zaporizhzhia and Kherson, I think that the Russians are probably going to have to financially collapse for the Ukrainians to be able to get the kind of offensive momentum going to push towards Crimea. Generally, the Russians don't need to have an exorbitantly good supply line, at least in the area of Kherson, because there's a river that's a natural barrier there that really cuts down the combat normally. And Ukrainian landing parties have not really seen a lot of success in that area. Well, the Zaporizhzhia front, they have the Surovikin line to fall back on. So I would have to say, generally, in my opinion, I think it's going to be a while before they ever get close to Crimea, and it'd probably be a year and a half from now before they were ever able to coalesce that as a legitimate strategic reality. So I hope that does address that live chat the best I can, and a huge shout out once again to Dan Brooks for that incredible support and helping this channel to keep it running and sponsoring a live chat. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 20 from Maxwell Conan, and thank you very much, Maxwell, for that $20 support. He said, right now, there is a dangerous shortage of American speakers of critical languages. Also, fewer people are taking relevant language classes, such as Chinese. How does this impact our war readiness, and what can be done in LSA? And you know the good news about that, Maxwell, is even if that is true, that is one thing that AI could actually replace, or we could automate that to a large degree. That's actually one thing that could be. I'm not advocating people to get, completely, unfamiliar with foreign languages. Like, it's generally a good thing, I think, to know a foreign language if people have the time to learn it. But that is something that won't affect our war readiness because we have technology that can fill that gap. But Enforcer, what say you?
Well, actually, that is a great question, because it allows me to highlight something that they don't really talk about in the military a whole lot. It's always nice to have some requisite foreign language skills, and I would honestly say, folks, unfortunately, I was never able to learn a foreign language all that well. The only class we had in high school was Spanish, and unfortunately, at the time, I just didn't have that much of an interest in Spanish. Now I do. Like, actually, I have a pretty big interest in Spanish nowadays, but back then I just didn't, so I didn't really take the class and focus on a lot. And on top of that, it was the clinical kind of Spanish that doesn't really apply to any real world scenario, unfortunately. So outside of that, though, I would always encourage everybody to learn at least a second language. It doesn't have to be Spanish. It could be any language of your choosing, because it is the sign of education, historically at least. Latin is a good one to learn. Although it's a dead language, it helps you to learn a lot of other languages that are a descendant of the Latin language pretty easily. So it'd help you to learn Italian, Spanish, or French, because they're all part of the Romanic language family, or the Romanesque language family, which all are derivatives of Latin. But outside of that, though, the thing about the military that generally fixes that problem, if we had to have a living speaking translator that was not AI, is the Defense Language Institute, which is actually a special educational department of the Department of Defense, to where if they need a translator, they send them there, and they can teach them any language to where they can speak it decently enough and translate it decently enough in a couple of months. I think their longest course is something like 3.5 months, but they can actually teach a course quickly enough and well enough that they can get you to speak a language somewhat fluently in 3.5 months. It's actually pretty crazy. I don't know what kind of techniques they use at the Defense Language Institute to teach people language that quickly. I think it's no lifing it 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3.5 months. I think that's how they learn it that quickly. But they're pretty efficient with it. So if we ever started to run out of a volume of foreign language speakers that did not speak English and we needed them, the military could just start telling people in whatever branch they needed them, which would most likely be the Navy. They would say, hey, look, you need to go learn Arabic, so we're sending you to the Defense Language Institute to go learn that. You need to come back in 3.5 months fluent enough to be able to speak it and also understand someone speaking it to you. We could definitely do that. So we do have a fail-safe for that in the Defense Language Institute if we run out of those sorts of people. But it's always good to have people who are either naturally learned in that language to be a translator because they'll know all of the nuances, or it's good to have people who learn that outside of school and become very familiarized with it because they also will understand a lot more nuance. So a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that the best I can, because as far as war readiness, we don't really have to worry about that all too much, because if there was ever a critical shortage, they could always send them here. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 20 from Jay Bagwell, and thank you very much, Jay, for that $20 support, and we do appreciate that. He said, active risk of chemical explosion currently happening at the GKN AIRSPACE in Orange County, California. They make the F-35 canopies, apparently, and 40,000 citizens evacuated. And also, Jay is the one who actually tipped me off with that super chat right there earlier to check that. I hadn't heard about it until he mentioned it, and also, it does appear to be a very big deal. I mean, when you evacuate 40,000 people, that's definitely no small matter, to say the least. So, I'm not sure what's happened. Let me actually pull that up and see what's happened. Let's see here. Air GKN Aerospace, California. Let's see if it's done anything. Let's see here. It's saying is the plant at risk of exploding. So they haven't said if it's exploded or anything yet. They haven't given an update. It looks like the last update was 3 hours ago. It said the firefighters are there trying to deal with it. So hopefully it doesn't explode, hopefully. But I mean, that's a pretty bad thing to evacuate that many people. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it's a pretty major incident from what we can hear. I actually remember that something like this actually happened back in the day. I think 80,000 people were evacuated during a Mississauga train derailment near Mississauga in Canada. And if I remember correctly, it was a Canadian national train. It derailed and it had some sort of chemical similar to this on board. And crazily enough, it never ignited, which they thought there was a huge risk of that, if I remember right. Or it did ignite or something, but they were able to evacuate everyone and no one was injured or killed, even on the train. And I hope that this is a similar sort of a case with this evacuation, because I don't know a lot about this kind of chemical, how flammable it is, how toxic it is when it burns, how toxic it is just to breathe it, breathe the fumes near to it. I would assume it probably is, because anything that's put on the canopy of an F-35, I would assume it's probably pretty toxic in liquid form. So hopefully that turns out well, but evacuating 40,000 people, that's got, like, I wonder how large the evacuation area is in terms of radius, like a mile, 2 miles. I don't think we've ever heard that yet, or at least covered it here on the channel, but it has to be a pretty significant breadth and scope in this area for it to be that many people. But a huge thanks to you for support, Jay, and sharing that with us, because that was actually what tipped Matthew off for us to be able to cover that breaking news on air. And do we have any other developments on that so far since we first broke that news?
So no new developments right now. But to answer the question about the chemicals that are involved, apparently it's toxic. That's the problem with it. So they don't want people breathing that in to a large degree. So that's why they're evacuating people.
So I bet if it burns, that'd be pretty bad.
Yeah, I'd imagine so.
Dang, then what are they gonna do? like what are they gonna do? Like, how do they clean
Just
this
let
up?
it spill.
Well, yeah, but they have to clean it up eventually. It's like, how are they going to clean it up? How much will that cost? Would they find it more effective to burn it? What if it starts to seep through the ground and into the groundwater?
Who knows, honestly.
This sounds pretty bad. like when you think about it, this sounds pretty bad. Either this is going to start seeping into the groundwater in this area because they're not going to be able to clean it up quick enough, or they're going to have to burn it to stop that from happening, and then we're going to see a toxic cloud over LA, well, at least West Anaheim and most of this area down here. It's crazy how big LA is. It's unbelievably huge, because for a second there, when we first covered this, I thought it was close to LAX because we've landed there. That's 26 miles away. That's like all the way from here down to Provo, here from Salt Lake City. That's like a huge distance. That's not even to the end of LA, which is all the way down here at Mission Viejo. if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But anyways, with that, I hope that has addressed that well, and a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
You said, and with that about 5 times in a row, right? You said
Man, I'm
5
trying
times
my
in a
best.
row.
I'm fighting my life
Oh,
here,
man.
man.
But also, we do have some news, by the way. The UK MTO's put out a warning. It looks like in the Strait of Hormuz. They're saying that they've received a report of an incident 200 nautical miles west of Socotra. I'm not really familiar with that location, but it's apparently an island. Actually, this is not in the Strait of Hormuz. This is actually over on the other side, the Red Sea Strait, actually. They're saying that a vessel was approached by a small craft with 5 persons on board, and the vessel's armed security team deployed, and the small craft altered course away from the vessel. So this could be maybe the Houthis or possibly the Somali pirates back at it again from the looks of it.
Yarr, we be looking for that fine Peruvian blow. Yarr, like in that fine, beautiful ransom. We'll be charging 65 million for the boat. But yeah, it sounds like pirates to me, most likely. But I gotta say, folks, to be a sailor right now, anywhere around the Arabian Peninsula, that's a tough break. But with that, it is time for us to get on and into the next one.
And our next super chat goes to JMP Traveler. And thank you very much, JMP, for that $20 support. He said, Disney has ships at sea than the Russian fleet. So legally, we have to call it the Russian flotilla. Take one from the chat.
Is that true? Like, does Disney Cruise Lines have... Hold up. Disney Cruise Lines. Number of ships. Let's see. If we go to the here. And how many ships do they have? Oh, let's see here. Dang. They don't say. They don't say. Oh, dang. Where the hell is it? Well, oh, here we go. Fleet. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wow, they actually have a lot. They have 8 cruise ships. And some of them are humongous, like in gross tonnage. Like the Disney Adventure. I feel like this is an Oasis class that's just been repainted into Disney colors.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with any of those, to be honest.
Let's see here. The class is the Global class, which was built in Germany, actually. So that's pretty interesting. But I guess they kind of would. If we're talking about the Black Sea Fleet, I mean, this would actually be, in terms of gross tonnage, way bigger than anything left in the Black Sea Fleet, probably in the whole Russian Navy. So that's actually kind of wild. Also, it's kind of crazy to think that apparently the Disney Cruise Line started in 1996, because for some reason I always thought that they were around since like the very early 90s, not like the mid to late 90s, but that's pretty interesting. Also, let's see here. I wonder. You know, I've looked at folks at like cruise reviews. I don't think I'll ever step foot on a cruise ship. At least for the most part, because our only experience with one was pretty bad. But I've looked at the Disney cruises. Honestly, they're just not for me. Like, you know, it's like too Disney oriented. I'm not really like a big person into Disney. And so, you know, it's like, I don't really like, I don't get the appeal. I think I'd be more of like a Royal Caribbean kind of a person or something if I ever went on a cruise, because they look like they have like really cool ones, and they have cruises everywhere. You know, they have some in Europe, here in America, some that go up to Alaska, and those seem pretty neat to me. These mostly just hang out in the Bahamas, from what I know. So, you know, I don't know, like, I've kind of seen that my whole life, or kind of been around that general area my whole life. So, anyways, with that, a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have one from My Hands Are On Fire, who put in a $20 support. And thank you very much, My Hands Are On Fire, for keeping the chat on fire and throwing in that support. We do appreciate it very much. He did not leave a comment, but of course, that support is very much appreciated, and it does help keep the channel running. And we also have a 20 from Manly Taylor, and Manly said, Pizza Fund.
Hey, and a humongous thanks to you for the support for the Pizza Fund, Manly Taylor. We greatly appreciate some delicious, tasty pizza, and it's always a wonderful and great thing. I haven't had a pizza in about a week, I think, at this point. I haven't had pizza in a hot minute, you see, folks, because for some reason I just kind of got burnt out on pizza here recently. But, you know, it's still pretty good. I mean, you know, it's not bad. It's just that I've been trying to get some new flavors. Like today, I got barbecue. Oh, by the way, folks, I forgot to tell you, because some people were interested in, like, you know, Salt Lake City barbecue good. I've actually been getting some barbecue here lately, and I'd actually have to tell y'all, Salt Lake City barbecue is actually neck and neck with most Alabama barbecue joints. Like it's basically same quality. Didn't expect that. I thought that this wouldn't be a barbecue kind of a place because they wouldn't know what barbecue is, but they actually do. And they've also added a couple of Cajun things to the barbecue menus because they just look at all of that as the South and barbecue and whatnot. So you can get like a boudin with your barbecue, and it doesn't have to be like a Cajun place specifically to get it. And I was like, that is sick. Like that is really cool. So I got a boudin, and I got some brisket, and I got some pulled pork tonight with some macaroni and cheese, and it was damn good. I tell you, I would say 10 out of 10, it's as good as Alabama barbecue. I don't think it could get better though. I think like Southern barbecue is the best that can get, but it is definitely neck and neck with it. So I was pretty impressed with that. But a humongous thanks to you once again for the support, and also a big thanks to My Hands Are on Fire for the support as well. I actually didn't get to thank you for that one, but a huge thanks to you as well, because folks like you help this channel to keep on running and make this thing a reality. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
Our next one goes to Ghost of the Old World, who puts in a 15. And thank you very much, Ghost, for that $15 support. He said, good evening from Charleston. About Cuba, how likely a Hormuz-style situation would be hitting ships in the Florida Straits and oil and energy infrastructure in Florida, assuming the drone threat is real?
It would be highly unlikely, reality of it, because the Cubans aren't really in a situation to control any waterway, per se, like the Iranians can with the Strait of Hormuz. Because if we look at the farthest tip of Cuba to Mexico, that area is about 120 miles wide, meaning that response times would be pretty long there, and the strait between Florida and Cuba is about 90 miles wide as well. So there's just not really a waterway that's narrow enough and heavily trafficked enough to be able to give the Cubans that kind of leverage. Also, on top of that, most shipping except for oil in the Gulf is non-existent, because most of the major intermodal ports are actually in cities like yours, in Charleston Harbor. You can actually see a humongous part of the auto port here. This is where a lot of roll-on, roll-off vessels pull up to load up with cars or to load off cars into the United States. And you can also see some of the rest of that around here. And I think y'all's intermodal port is, yeah, it's actually on up here. Actually, no, this is a naval yard. Where the hell is the... Oh, here it is. Here's y'all's intermodal port. And this is one of the bigger ones down in the southeast. I believe there's also a similar kind of port infrastructure around Savannah, Georgia. And you actually see the larger intermodal port here at Savannah. And you can also see, I think, some bulk aggregate port facilities here as well. So generally, most of the traffic just doesn't enter the United States through the Gulf for intermodal or bulk aggregates. It's really just oil. And to be honest, if the Cubans did that, it would kind of be a reprieve, because we wouldn't have to give oil to the Europeans, because they wouldn't have a way to get into the Gulf ports. So we'd be able to kind of keep more of it here and kind of stretch our oil supplies a little bit longer, although that would not be good for Europe. So I hope that does answer that the best I can. And a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I also got to say, Charleston, you live in Charleston, huh? I've never actually been to Charleston. Is it nice there? Because I've heard things about Charleston. I've heard that's very cool and really historic, and I've heard some people say that there's kind of like some questionable parts, but I mean, that's like every city. They all got questionable parts. But I wonder, what does it look like here in Charleston? Let's do a city review real quick. Oh, wow, damn, they got cruise ships that pull right up to the city. That's really cool. I didn't know that they had cruises that went out of Charleston.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, I didn't know that at all myself. They got a customs house. What else do y'all have? Honestly, this place looks really cool. Like, I would honestly like to take... I've never been to Charleston. Would y'all believe that, folks? We were only a couple of 100 miles away. I never went to Charleston once, but it looks like a really cool place, honestly. Let's do a street review here real quick. Let's take a look at that. Oh, wow, this is, like, really cool, actually. This is pretty neat. I'm being told this is a rabbit hole, folks. I thought folks liked rabbit holes around here, you know? And we got plenty of time.
We have a lot more super chats to get to, and we're starting to take like 5 minutes on each question. We're going to be here until 1 o'clock in the morning if we keep that up.
Well, yeah, but I'm just trying to give some folks a little bit of a variety and, you know, give them a little bit of a bang for the buck, considering, you know, that these folks are helping the channel to keep running. But beyond that, though, nice.
But they do like the channel. But also, we also had to get questions in the live chat question segment too. So we want to save some time for that as well.
I suppose so. But big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Big Ron, and thank you very much, Big Ron, for that $10 support. He said, how desperate do you think Russia and Putin is feeling right now? I would say they're feeling damn desperate, very desperate. That's why Putin's lashing out at NATO, and that's why we're seeing occasionally a couple of drones flying into some of these Baltic state countries. Is because I think that's because Putin's getting desperate. And also, he really can't control the drone attacks that's happening on the oil refineries. So all that stuff adding up, and also his approval rating sinking through the floor. That's definitely not helping either. So I think some of the stuff I would say is definitely self-inflicted. That Putin would say. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that they're probably not thinking that they're in a good spot. I don't really think there's a way they could at this point because economically they're up the creek without a paddle. They don't really have any way to ship oil out to make any money off of reliably. And also the Russian military is still taking significant losses in Ukraine. So I'd say they're probably in a pretty bad off spot. But a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Cookie, and thank you, Cookie, for that $10 support. He said, take one from the stream and LSA.
Hey, and a big thanks to you for support, Cookie. And honestly, I could go for a cookie right now. I haven't seen a crumble cookie around here in Salt Lake City. They started in Salt Lake City. I don't think I've seen a single crumble cookie the whole time I've been here, which is weird.
I don't think I have either. I haven't seen them anywhere.
I mean, where the hell are they in the city? Because it started in Salt Lake. I've seen a crumble cookie everywhere but Salt Lake, come to think of it. So honestly, I would kind of go for one of those right now. Those sound really good. I had a swig today, by the way, folks. I had a strawberry breeze. That was amazing tasting. But that was after I got off the trail from like the snake path. I went to this one trail today, folks, that was near to the Wasatch Mountain. I think it's called like the Orson Smith Trail. And literally, I only did 0.6 miles on it. I hardly went up it and I went back down it. In like 13 minutes flat, and there were 3 snakes on the trail just during that area, and I was like, oh man, screw this. I was like, I'm not dealing with this today. There were so many snakes around there. They had a sign up now on the trail saying there's rattlesnakes all over the place here, don't mess with them and you'll be fine. And I was like, I think that's enough for me, I'm leaving. And so I got the hell out of there. But I would like a cookie right now. That'd actually be pretty good. But we will make sure to take one from the live chat in your honor. And so what do we got?
All right, so the one from the live chat here goes to none other than Opie from Florida, who said, do you think it's possible that Iran would attach mines and explosives to a vessel, sending it into the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz for when our guys land on it? Or is that something that would not be possible for them?
I'd highly doubt it. The monetary loss wouldn't really weigh out the benefit of blowing away a couple of Marines that board the vessel. And on top of that, if there were explosions below, it really wouldn't affect them up on deck. And also ships sink fairly slowly, even if there are a large amount of ruptures, and they'd still have a couple of minutes to be evac'd off. So I don't really think that they would be able to get enough reward out of the risk. So I don't think they'd ever try and pull something like that off. And also, it'd still have to be manned and crewed to be able to keep it on a proper heading and a proper speed to be able to make it to the blockade in the first place, meaning that it'd be pretty hard for them to pull that off. But a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Paul DeSena, and thank you, Paul, for that $10 support. He said, the strikes on Russian supply lines are a great strategy. It's worked since the 1770s with Burgoni when he lost the Battle of Saratoga because he outran the supply lines and got cut off from New Hampshire to Vermont.
I think that's Bouillon, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's a French name. But that is actually true. Like, supply lines are incredibly important, and outrunning any sort of logistics or supply lines is not really an ideal sort of a thing. Many people have done that, like, for example, invading Russia. Because whenever people invade Russia, the strategy has always been scorched earth and generally destroying anything that's about to be taken by an invading force. Because back in the day, and also Germany lived on this concept in World War II, which was just literally brain dead, they have these supply concepts of living off of the land, which is ridiculous. Like, I don't even, like, it worked back in the day, like in the medieval era and in the Napoleonic era, but nowadays this just would never work. The idea is that an invading army will just live off of whatever they can find and scrounge up in the area. So if they can find some food in a local town, they'll buy it, or they'll just steal it, basically. If they can find any food out in the fields, they'll just harvest that and eat it. That was basically the concept of the supply lines and how they worked back then. And the Russians would just burn everything that was about to be taken over, so there was nothing to live off of. That's why the German army lost in the Second World War. That's why Napoleon lost in the Napoleonic Wars when he invaded Russia as well, is because they worked off of that supply concept, and there was literally nothing to live off of because the Russians would burn it all. And so it is something crazy to think that the Russians are pretty much operating in that concept right now. But instead of them doing the scorched earth, the Ukrainians are scorching their earth and their supply lines, leaving them with nothing to live off of at this point. They will lose the war in time if this continues. And it will, guaranteed. But a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. And I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And also, we have a 20 that just came in from Crispy yet again. And thank you very much, Crispy, for the second support of the night. He said, thank you, Enforcers, and you guys are amazing. And you're amazing, Crispy, and thank you once again for supporting the channel. Also, by the way, you must have put those kiddos to bed already. You must have put them to bed, or either they're still up, one or the other. But you must have got them put to bed.
I would suppose so, and I gotta thank you so much for the incredible support, Crispy, and I hope that our words meant something to him. And a huge thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Blood Potato, who put in a 10. And thank you very much, Blood Potato, for the support. He said, if Congress gets fed up with lack of action in the Middle East and declares war on Iran, would that take power out of the president's hand and allow the military to act without explicit orders? And no, it would not, actually. The president's the commander-in-chief. He is the one who directs the military. The only thing that Congress can do is they can simply either enforce the War Powers Act, which means 60 days and then 30-day withdrawal period, or they can say it's over with and it's done. That's what they can do. They have the exclusive power to declare war, but the way the forces are used are exclusively at the president's discretion. But Enforcer, what say you?
So the way that the country is constitutionally structured is that the executive branch, which is what the president is supposed to execute the laws and actions of the republic as they are deemed by Congress. Congress is the decision-making power in the government. Generally, it's actually supposed to be in their wheelhouse to be able to do things such as declaring war. But if they declare war, it's now the duty of the president to execute upon that declaration of war and to see to it that either the United States is able to achieve victory or the war is fought as best as it can be, even if it ends up being a defeat. That's exactly how it's laid out in the Constitution. And also that is what you said, Matthew, but I'm just laying it out in my own words here, you know, because I have a voice. I have a voice. So I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Old Marabert, and thank you very much for the $10 support, by the way. He said, why is there so much air activity over Iran right now, and is the government fleeing? And love the channel and great analysis, and hopefully I can convince my wife to let me donate more next paycheck, LSA. And we appreciate all the support, by the way. I don't really see a big air activity, though, over Iran. I've been checking throughout the night. I've seen a couple of, like, smaller little, like, Mahan air flights leaving and stuff like that, but not really a big exodus of aircraft to a large degree. So I don't think they're probably fleeing. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say they're probably not fleeing. I would generally doubt that. So a big thanks to you for support. Long live the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Game Theory, and thank you, Game Theory, for that support. And oh dear. Sadly, Game Theory, I don't know if we're gonna be able to address this one because it gets into some sketchy stuff, to say the least. So I don't think we'll be able to address it. But of course, though, we do appreciate the support once again. And Enforcer, what say you?
And a big thanks to you for the support, Game Theory, and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 7 from Winston Smith, who said, I love your voice impersonations, LOL, and you guys are the best.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Winston Smith. And I try my best. You don't know what I'm going up against here. But a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
Also, man, can we stop the passive-aggressive comments?
I'm not making any passive-aggressive comments. I'm literally...
It sounds passive-aggressive. But our next one here goes to Robert Krogan, who puts in a 5. He said, good evening, Enforcers and LSA, and just a little something for the effort, and grab one from the chat.
And thank you so much for the support, Robert, and helping this channel to keep on running. And we will make sure to get one from the chat.
And the one from the chat goes to Elijah, who said, do you think that the Houthis would be joining and ending their ceasefire in upcoming strikes?
Can you reread that one?
They said, do you think that the Houthis would be joining and ending their ceasefire in upcoming strikes?
Yeah, generally no, because for the most part, most of the terrorist forces that Iran supports operate in this weird middle ground where they pretend like they're outside of the control of Iran, but then whenever Iran needs it out of convenience, they then act like they control them. So I hope that does address that the best I can, and a big thanks for your sponsoring our live chat and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Tammy, and thank you, Tammy, for that 10. They said, why couldn't we bomb the coastline, take out their air defenses, arm citizens, and back them up with drones and air support? And if successful, they would hand over the uranium without a high-risk op.
I would have to say, generally, that's what we've been aiming for on the channel. It's just that they don't have the follow-through to be able to do that. But a big thanks to you for your support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Swad, who said, thanks, guys, for the great analysis. And Russian nuclear use doctrine thresholds have been crossed, and watch out for tactical nuclear weapon use. I don't know. That would be a very, very serious thing for Russia to use a nuke. I think they mainly use it as a deterrence factor. Once they use it, by the way, their deterrence factor is gone once they use it. So they'll have lost all their cards, as some would say out there. So I don't think they'll use it personally. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would say, generally, I would doubt that as well. And so, big thanks to you for your support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Raphael Philippe, and he said, if I had to bet, I'd say that the most possible breakthrough, if there's one to UAF, is in the Kamyansk vector.
The Kamyansk vector, are you saying Kupiansk? Because I don't think there is a Kamyansk vector at the moment that I've heard of. So, I would have, actually, they did have a breakthrough in Kupiansk, and they generally pushed the Russians out of the city a while ago. So I definitely see what you're saying there if you're saying Kupiansk. Maybe you're saying a different pronunciation of the town name, because I don't think I've heard of a Kamyansk at the moment. But big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Slinger. And Slinger said, good evening, Enforcers. And any news on the IRGC and attempts on the president daughter today? And thank you, and LSA.
I actually didn't hear about that myself, so I would have to declare ignorance on that. But a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Slinger, who said, how's the pizza index looking today, gents?
I actually wouldn't know. I didn't really look at that myself. Do you know anything about it, Matthew?
Let me go check real quick and see. Let's see here. Pentagon Pizza Index. Let's see here. Also, by the way, folks, like the pizza index thing is starting to get to the point where it's not really a reliable indicator anymore. I don't know what they're doing with it, but it seems like it's all over the place these days. But it does look like there is a spike in activity, though, at a Domino's Pizza pretty close by. And also another pizzeria apparently nearby. It's having like a 167% spike. But of course, it is Friday, though. So, you know, people might order takeout on Friday. So that might be why it's spiking like that. So I don't know. Like the pizza index used to be something we could use, but it's starting to get to where everybody's watching it so much, and also it's just getting skewed, I think. So I'm not sure if we can really use it.
And so with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Blockbuster, and thank you, Blockbuster, for that 5. And we're definitely not reading that one off. But we also have a 2 from Plazoth, and thank you, Plazoth, as well, for that $2 support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And a big thanks to both of y'all for the support, because y'all are helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 2 from Specific Gravity, who said LSA, and also Theodore Martin, who put in a 2 and said LSA.
And a big shout out to both of y'all, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 2 from Go-Kart, who said, you guys are killing it, as usual.
And a big thanks to you for support, and thank you for the kind words. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 1 from Tammy. And thank you very much, Tammy, for that $1 support. And I don't think Tammy did leave a comment. Wait a minute, hold on here. What's going on? Why does it say 1 on it? Let's see here. I don't know what happened with this when I copied and pasted and it turned into a 1. It's actually a $10 support. But thank you very much, Tammy, for that 10. I'm not sure what happened to my spreadsheet here. It apparently got mixed up as a 1. And then it also deleted the comment out of the spreadsheet, too. That's weird. But Tammy put in a 10, and thank you for that support. It said, why couldn't we bomb the coastline? I could have sworn I read this one off already. Didn't I read this one?
Yeah, you already read that one off.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that. I read it off, but something has gone wrong in the spreadsheet. I don't know what's going wrong here, but I guess all we can say is a huge thanks, Tammy, once again. I hope we answered that question good. We also have a 5 from Game Theory, who said merch by July 4th.
Unfortunately, no. We just sadly don't have merch in the works right now. We're still trying to work on just getting the basics ironed out for that for next year for LSA week on the 5th anniversary. So sadly, we won't have any merch for the 4th of July. But I am trying to work in the background on getting a special 250th anniversary intro going, and maybe just kind of tweaking the one that we have right now into being a little bit more about the 250th, although we can't really do a lot to it. I'm trying trying to figure out something to do for it to make it 250. But a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And with that, folks, it's now time to move on to our live chat questions proper and also get our Morse code decoders of the night. And tonight we had the entire roster. We had Paul, Kevin, Mason, Joni, Norm, Arabelle, Heroya Fluffiness, Kush, Koteric, Sire, and Brian. And it said the Morse says Russia is getting beat up left and right so badly they don't even know how to respond. And LOT, LSA.
And ding, 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 ding. Shh. That's the same Morse code as last night. But y'all got that done on the nail once again. And I got to say a huge congratulations to y'all once again for getting that right time and time again throughout the entirety of the history of the channel. And so a huge congrats to y'all once again. And with that, folks, it's time for us to get on into some live chat questions. We actually have 14 minutes to answer live chat questions. So, Matthew, what do we got?
And our first live chat question goes to Gabriel, who said, hey there, Matt and Enforcer. Do you believe a Cuban invasion or takeover will begin shortly, or will the Iran war take over and push that aside eventually? And would it be a war or more like Venezuela? I don't know. I mean, they could be going for Cuba. Like I saw some people saying that Cuba was going to be next. And it could be because it looks like they're upping the surveillance flights around Cuba. But the problem is, though, we're still not finished with Iran. So unless the U.S. is simply trying to go invade Cuba quickly and perform military action on it, think it's going to be like a quick win, a quick victory under their belt for propaganda reasons, I'm not sure why we'd be messing with Cuba in the midst of the Iran situation, because the Iran situation could be detrimental to the United States if it goes wrong, any further wrong than it's gone. But Cuba, I mean, Cuba really doesn't have much of an impact on anything at this point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that generally, I don't really think they could give that much resistance, and I think that most resistance will probably crumble. That doesn't mean that it would be quick and easy, like by any means. It's just that an opening invasion would probably go pretty swiftly. It'd probably be the occupation afterwards that would get a little bit hairy. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we actually have another super chat. So what do we got?
And this one goes to David Ford, who puts in a 5. And thank you, David, as well. He said, if you work at any barbecue place in the U.S., you will eventually get tourists who say in a very irate manner, I'm from fill in the blank and I know barbecue.
Honestly, that's true. That is actually true. You're always going to get someone from the South who's like, I'm from Alabama and this ain't barbecue. Honestly, like, I have been to some places, though, like the Pacific Northwest, that do not know barbecue, and the barbecue is pretty bad. But generally, Salt Lake City actually has some pretty good barbecue. But I think that's probably because some people moved from the South out here. But then again, that's like every city in America at this point. You can find any restaurant of any food type, and someone from that area that has that food is running the restaurant, and usually it's pretty good stuff, especially here in Salt Lake City. Like, I would say that the food quality here across the board is way higher in variety, at least, than you would get in Alabama. But a huge thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a live chat question from none other than Bob. And thank you very much, none other than Bob. Also, by the way, I think this is the one right here that was sponsored by a super chatter earlier. I think this was the one sponsored by Chillin' Kudvakin, actually. But I hope we answered that one well, by the way. It was the one about possible nuke being used on Kyiv right there. But unfortunately, we just have to weigh in on it again.
No, I think we answered that one well enough back then. So with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one's going to go to Scout, who said, why is Ukraine targeting the oil sites and not Russia's Air Force?
I would say, well, generally because the oil sites actually cause economic damage. Blowing up Russia's aircraft would do them a little bit of good, but considering that aircraft are very rarely used in Ukraine in any really effective way because the airspace is contested, it isn't really that big of a priority to go after most of the actual frontline aircraft, like the fighter bombers and whatnot. They did go after some strategic aircraft because those are used in the standoff capacity to launch the cruise missiles and ballistic missiles at Ukraine that we've seen in prior attacks and current attacks, but generally attacking those frontline aircraft, while it's cool and it definitely amounts to some losses, it doesn't really produce the kind of results that Ukraine is looking for as much as the attacks on the oil infrastructure. So I hope that does address it the best I can, and we're on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Console, who said, could the U.S. not invest in the UK's underwater mine clearing technology to help in the Strait of Hormuz?
Generally they could, but right now we kind of need immediate results, and investing in technology is a good thing. Don't get me wrong, and it would definitely help us out in the future, but that sort of technology probably wouldn't be fieldable in the immediate moment right now in the next couple of months when we would need it the most. It would probably be long afterwards once we're in an economic depression, and then it would kind of be for naught to have that kind of advanced mining equipment because it wasn't really able to help out at the moment that we needed it. So I hope that does address that the best we can, and with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be Rusty. And Rusty said, can you guys check out Concord Park in Havre de Grace, Maryland? The most beautiful park I've been to with a lot of military history. And also, I love the stream.
And yeah, of course we can check it out. We can check out that park. Let's see, it's Concord Park in, I don't know how to pronounce that town, but let me see if I can pull it up here really quickly and find it here. Let's see. Let me type it in a little bit closer to Maryland. So Concord Park. And let's see here. Can we find it? Let's see here. Oh, here it is, actually, right here. Concord Point Park. So let's take a look at it. Oh, wow, I like that carving. That's a really nice wood carving. The birds of the Chesapeake. Do y'all have bald eagles up there? It's actually pretty cool. We didn't have a lot of bald eagles in Alabama. We mostly had bald eagles like up towards Huntsville, but where we lived in Montgomery and Birmingham, there was very seldom ever a bald eagle, or there were basically none because they don't live that south. But that is actually a really cool little point, like a little park, a little point here in Havre de Grace. Hopefully there's a lot of grace up in here. But it looks like a really nice little spot. Like, look at these pictures. Like, this is
I wonder how much it costs to live in a place like this.
Probably a pretty decent bit, I'd assume, because it looks like it's in a pretty nice little area. Is it around Annapolis? I actually don't really know where Annapolis is.
Let's see. It says median listing price $429,000 to $450,000.
Oh,
So
wow,
I,
that's
I
not
think
bad.
in the scheme, I think in the scheme of modern day housing, I mean that used to be like middle of the road, I think, for that, or like a little bit on the medium high end. Now that's considered like entry level, I think, which is crazy by the way, because that's like $200 a square foot on average right there. But yeah, apparently just under $500,000 for most houses in that area.
Yeah, that's pretty wild, actually. That's pretty affordable to live there. It looks pretty nice, actually. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And actually, it looks like we have one last super chat here before we round the stream for the night. So what do we got?
And this one goes to Gary Schreiber, who put in a 2. And thank you very much, Gary. He said, I just wanted to be last, and good night.
And a big good night to you, Gary. And a huge thanks to you for the support. And thank you for being the last Super Chatter of the night. And so with that, folks, we've reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to say humongous thanks to each and every single one of y'all once again for watching. It has been an honor and a pleasure to be able to cover this news on the stream for each and every single one of y'all. Of course, we will be seeing you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world. And if there is a short war video, Enforcer Matt will be the one making it. And so with that, we will see you all for one of those tomorrow. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini, Ram Slava, long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, we will see you all tomorrow on the usual nightly War News stream time at 10 p.m. Eastern. And also a big shout out to the 102,000 plus people that were here tonight. And of course, over the entire Memorial Day weekend, we will be on high alert, ready to go live if something happens with Iran. And we'll be watching all of our sources very closely to see if anything's going to happen with that. But if there is a short war video to come out, it'll come out midday tomorrow. And I'll see if I can put one out tomorrow. Usually these days, it seems like the news is really sparse in the morning, but then it's really heavy in the evening. So we'll have to see. I think it lines up with Ukraine's attack timing like that. But we'll see you all tomorrow. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroam Slava. Get some rest and good night.